the beginning of the meeting is only because it was opportunity for us to kick off,
So I know you all
not
probably saw
necessarily
us
this
having
week's
on these
homecoming, but next
sunglasses
week's
at the beginning
homecoming
of the meeting, and it's
opportunity
only because it was
that we have
opportunity
here in the
for us to
district.
kick off.
Again, it
Not
was just a nice,
necessarily
fun
this
way
week's
to,
homecoming,
again,
but next week's
all hail
homecoming
Purple Knights
opportunity
coming up next week
that
for the
we have here in the
homecoming
district.
opportunities.
Again, it was
Naturally,
just a nice,
I do
fun
have
way
some
to again
scheduled meetings that a lot of
all
people
hail
don't know
Purple
about as
Knights coming
pertains
up
to
next
making
week
sure
for the
everything goes well that
homecoming
week.
opportunities.
Um,
Naturally,
but we
This is your first one.
scheduled meetings that a lot of people
but
don't
we
know
will
about as
have
pertains to making sure
hopefully
everything goes
again we
well
want to
that
have an
week.
awesome opportunity to celebrate with
This is your first one.
all of the
But we
Purple
will
Knights
have,
in the community
hopefully
for
again, we
homecoming.
want to have an awesome opportunity to
Homecoming is next
celebrate
week
with
on Friday, the game, and of course the dance is
all
on
of
Saturday. I
the
believe the parade
Purple
is on
Knights
Friday as
in the
well.
community for
And
homecoming.
so more information will be
Homecoming is
shared
next
with the
week
general
on Friday,
public
the game, and of course the dance is on Saturday. I believe
about
the
that
parade is on
as we
Friday
do
as
every
well.
year. And so
And so more
I think
information
we
will be
all can
shared with the
remember
general
our
public
homecoming when we went back in the day. But
about that
again,
as we do every year. And
class of
so
'98.
I
But
think we all can remember our
just want to make
homecoming
sure I
when we
put
went
some of that
back in
thought
the
into
day.
the room.
But again,
Naturally, I also have an additional
class of
conversation I
98.
really wanted to have, and this month and
just
going
want to
into
make sure I
next
put
month,
some of
I have
that
been
thought into the room.
really trying to recognize
Naturally,
a
I
lot
also
of people
have
who
an
helped us
additional
kind of
conversation
move
I really
through
wanted to
our
have in this
reconfiguration.
month and going
And
into
last
next month.
week, of
I have
course, I
been
recognized
really trying to
some TC
recognize a
networks and
lot of
some
people
other
who helped us
groups
kind of move
that helped us
through
get to
our
this point.
reconfiguration.
Naturally, this
And
week, I
last
really
week,
wanted to
of course, I
recognize our
recognized
Central
some
Enrollment
TC
Office.
networks and
We
some
call it
other
the CEO
groups
office, and
that
some of the
helped us
people who
get to this
also help us
point.
with registration.
Naturally, this week, I
A
really
lot of
wanted
this
to
work
recognize our
that
Central Enrollment
people
Office. We
see
call it the
happens
CEO
again
office, and
behind the
some of the
scenes,
people
and
who also
someone
help us
has
with
to sit with
registration.
families, and someone
A lot
has
of this
to
work
make sure that
that
all the
people
forms are done, and
see
someone
happens
has to
again behind the scenes, and
cross-reference and
someone
check
has to sit with
all of that
families, and
information
someone
for
has to
accuracy.
make
And
sure
I
that
would
all the
just like to
forms
say
are
I would
done,
be
and
remiss
someone
if I
has
didn't
to
push some special thanks
cross-reference
out
and
into
check
the atmosphere
all of that information
for
for
Robin
accuracy.
By,
And I
our
would just
Skyward
like to say I
coordinator,
would be
Jenny
remiss
Francis,
if
our
I didn't
data
push some
clerk,
special thanks
the
out
entire
into the atmosphere
Central Enrollment
for
Office, which
Robin By,
includes
our
Julia
Skyward
Edwards,
coordinator, Jenny Francis, our
Christine
data
Squires,
clerk, the
Esther
entire
Sherrod, and of course
Central Enrollment
Teresa
Office,
Henderson.
which includes
Of course, to the
Julia
COLAC
Edwards,
Education Center,
Christine
we have
Squires,
Danette Lindes
Esther
and
Sherrod, and of course
Estefani
Teresa Henderson.
Sanchez.
Of course, to the
These are the
COLAC
people who
Education Center, we
have
have
helped us
Danette
tremendously
Lindes and
over the course of these
Estefani
past,
Sanchez.
I don't know,
These are the people who
months,
have helped us
years, and helping
tremendously
us
over
with this
the
work.
course of these
But I also would
past,
be remiss if I
I
didn't
don't
thank some
know,
of our own building secretaries that
months,
also play a huge
years
part
in
in
helping us
getting this work
with this
done.
work.
As you
But I
know, over
also
this
would be
past
remiss if
summer,
I
I
didn't thank some
moved
of our own building secretaries
the
that also
rollover
play a
time
huge
frame in
part
which
in
we
getting this work
would
done.
typically
As
roll
you
over
know, over
our
this past
district
summer, I
information
moved
systems in August.
the
I'm ready to
rollover
roll
time
over
frame in which
to
we
change rollover to
would
happen
typically roll over
in
our
July.
district
And
information
when that roll
systems
happened
in
in July, that
August.
actually
I would
opened
like
up
to
our
roll over
opportunities to do more of our
change rollover to
enrollment
happen
into our
in
district
July.
early.
And
We
when that
want to be
rollover happened in
players in this
July, that actually
conversation.
opened
We
up
don't
our
want to be late to the
opportunities to do
game,
more of
naturally.
our
And
enrollment
so
into
a
our
lot of
district
people
early.
pulled together in order for
We
that
want
to
to be
happen.
players in
Yes,
this
there were some bumps
conversation.
in
We
the
don't want to
road,
be
but I
late to
do
the
believe
game
that this
naturally.
process
And
now
so
will be
a
something that
lot
we
of
can
people
fix
pulled
and make
together
even
in order
better
for
moving
that to
forward.
happen. Yes, there
I
were some
also had a
bumps in
lot
the
of those
road,
summer
but I do
engagement
believe that this
activities.
process now
And so,
will
again,
be
there's a
something that we
lot
can
of things
fix
that
and
we
make
did
even
to
better
try to
moving forward.
increase
I also
our
had a lot of those
conversation
summer
around
engagement
enrollment here in the
activities.
school district.
And so
If
again,
there is
there's a
an
lot of
administrative
things that we
assistant
did
here
to
or
try
a
to
secretary in the room,
increase
would you
our
please do me an honor
conversation
and
around
standing,
enrollment
please?
here in the school district.
Please.
If there is an administrative assistant here or a secretary in the room, would you please do me an honor and standing, please? Please.
Naturally, we can't do it without you all, and there's a lot of things that we talk about doing, and we know that we turn around and we go right to someone else at times to help us get that done. I also have some principals in this conversation, and naturally they're here representing their administrative assistants as well. And I would like to just say thank you to your administrative assistants who are unable to be here tonight. But I also wanted to make sure that everyone know that this is not just a central office endeavor. This is a complete school district endeavor to get our kids enrolled. That is very important to me, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of you that helped to get that done. I can honestly say I was able to sit back as a district administrator and smile, wave, and shake hands when this opportunity was happening. But I do know that there's nights where people are still working late to get this work done and to make sure that all of our families are ready to go on day one. And that's been something that I've been stating, and everyone pulled together to do that. And so again, thank you to everyone who had anything to do with enrollment and or registration over these past few months and of course years. This year was a little bit different because again, the reconfiguration, but the same efforts went into it this year that I believe put us in a strong position as we look at our enrollment numbers for next year. I also would like to thank Tulio Duran and Maria. He's out in the vestibule there, and Maria Acevedo. They also played a huge role in helping with some translations here at the here at COLAC, and so naturally they coming from out their own specific places to assist us. It's just another way for us to say that we are building the team here that really is taking hold to one of the things that I really believe in, which is service at the highest level. And so service at the highest level is also looking at what you do for others. And so again, thank you to anyone again who had any role in that work. And so if I missed anyone, please note that I'm not trying to miss anyone in that thought, but I did want to make sure I bring some special attention to the Central Enrollment Office and everyone, again, who helps us with registration, which includes our administrative assistants and all of our buildings and secretaries. So again, one more round of applause to everybody who helped us with registration, which includes our administrative assistants and all of our buildings and secretaries. So again, one more round of applause. We are also at the point where we have had our third Friday count, and I'm not ready to share any numbers just yet because naturally third Friday count was just on Monday, and it's really not just the third Friday count. It's a conglomerate of the third Thursday count, the third Friday count, and the third Monday count. We just call it the third Friday count. And so it really should be the third Friday count. We really should say third Thursday, Friday, Monday count. But it's kind of a mouthful. So we typically have always used the third Friday count as a space to kind of recognize the work that goes into really getting everybody registered. And I'm not ready to share our numbers yet, but we are again in the throes of those conversations as we speak. Today is Tuesday. Naturally, yesterday was one of the last few days, but again, we have to go back and cross-reference lists and double check and cross our I's and dot our T's. And I believe that our enrollment will be strong this year, and that's just me being optimistic. Again, when the numbers finally come in, we'll know that for certain. That our enrollment will be strong this year, and that's just me being optimistic. I had a few other things that I really wanted to share with the district. One of the things is that naturally we've come into the school year. I had a few other things that I really want. I'd like to thank all of the teams who have helped us with the transition again. Naturally, people say, "Oh, you had a transition. You closed, you closed two schools. Kids moved around. K4 and we used to be K3, now we're K5, and it's happening, right? But we are in the second week. K4 in case we used to be K3, now we're K5. Start of the third week. It's happening, right? But we are in the second, and that's still a lot. And I would be remiss if I didn't put some thanks out to our teachers for the work that they've done in this work as well. Making sure that all of our families and students feel welcome to the spaces that they are now newly occupying throughout our K-8 conversation. As pertains to our high school, again, thank you so much for going door to door and knocking on kids' doors and saying we're ready for you to come back to school. Those things are very special, and that sometimes they can be missed. And when you say a high school staff went to door and knocked on every kid's door that was participating in our school year, that's just something different. And it goes to show the power of when we decide to come together as an administrative team. Not only that, but as a staff, as a community, as a board, as everything, right? When we come together, there's pretty much nothing that can't be accomplished. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that. It is my job to bring those conversations forward. And when we are doing that, and so again, thank you to everyone who had a lot to do with that conversation as well. My last point from my superintendent's report will really focus on the work that we have yet to, of course, move forward with. We are still a school district that seeks to meet expectations on the state report card. And I wanted to have this conversation in general, not conversation, just start from a superintendent's report, that we know that's part of our strategic plan. And we know that's something that we really want to accomplish. And it is something that we're going to be moving forward with and going towards in our school district. nothing is
that's something
is
that we
off the
really want to
table
accomplish.
as pertains to
And that
getting
is something
student
that we're gonna be
achievement.
moving
And I'm here to
forward,
say, as district
towards in our
administrator, not
school
just district manager, but a
Nothing
servant in this
is
conversation,
off the table
that again, together, there's nothing that we
getting
can't
student
erase
achievement.
from the
And I'm here
negative
to say, as
conversations that
district
possibly
administrator, not
happens
just
about
district
us
manager, but a servant in
as
this
pertains to where
conversation.
we are on
And
the
again,
report
together,
card.
there's nothing that
Now,
we can't
the report
erase
card does
from
not
the
dictate
negative
who we are.
conversations that possibly happen
It's a number
about us,
on
as pertains to
that's
where we
put
are on
together
the
from the
report card.
state, and
Now,
we
report card
look
does
at it
not
and
dictate who
we have to
are.
recognize it.
It's a
There's
number
a lot
on
of things
the,
about being a purple
that's
knight
put
that's not
together
necessarily
from the
captured
state.
on the report
We
card,
look at it,
and that also is going to
have
be captured in our
recognize it.
strategic plan.
There's a lot
And
of things
so
about
I just
being
want to
a
make sure I
purple
put that
knight
into
that's
the
not necessarily
atmosphere as
captured
well.
on the
We
report
are
card.
moving towards
And that
those
also
goals
is
in
gonna
our
be
strategic
captured in our
plan,
strategic
and it
plan.
is my
And so
responsibility to
I
make
just
sure I
want to make
stand here
sure
and
I
not
put
stand
that
here,
into
sit
the
here,
atmosphere as well.
and say
We are
that
moving
this is
towards
our
those goals in
goals.
our
These
strategic
are
plan.
things that we're
And
moving
it is my
towards.
responsibility
And
to make
again,
sure I
together,
stand here
there's
and not
nothing
stand
that
here,
we
sit here,
truly can't accomplish
and say
in that
this is our
opportunity.
goals.
And
These
so,
are
Board
things that
President
we're
Levy
moving
and the
towards.
rest of the members
And
of the
again,
board, as
together,
my
there's nothing that we
superintendent
truly
report.
can't accomplish in that opportunity.
Any
And so,
questions
Board
from board
President Levy
members?
and the rest of the members of the board, as my superintendent report.
Yes. So in terms of like how
Any
the year is
questions
starting
from board
off, like,
members?
could we, are there like highlights, how are
Yes.
things going? Like,
So
or,
in terms of like how the
what
year
have you
started
heard in
off,
terms of feedback for how the year's
could we,
gotten
are
started?
there like highlights?
This year, I
how
can
are
ask
things
for a better
going?
start.
Like,
When we
or,
went back to the
what have you
K-5
heard
setup,
in
I've
terms
heard
of feedback
from
for how
so
the
many
year's gotten
parents and
started?
so many students
This year,
that this
I can't ask for a better
transition
start.
for
When
them
we went
has
back
been
to
very
K-5
positive. I
setup,
have
I've
a
heard
few
from
principals in the
so
room,
many
and they can
parents and
contest
so
to the
many
fact that
students that
those
this
fifth graders
transition
who had
for
to
them
come back to the
has been
elementary
very positive.
schools
I have
where
a
they
few
used to
principals in
be,
the room, and they can
in most
contest to the
cases,
fact that
were
those
excited to
fifth
be
graders
again the
who had to come
big
back to
people
the
on campus
elementary
again, right?
schools
And
where they
so
used to be,
being
in
a fifth
most
grader in
cases,
elementary school
were
comes with some
excited
perks.
to be again the big
And so
people
again, a
on
lot of
campus
our
again,
families were
right?
real happy about that transition. And again, the fourth
being a fifth
graders
grader
who
in
would
elementary
have
school
traditionally
comes with
went
some
off to the
perks.
middle school
And
thought,
so again, a lot of our families were real
parents
happy
are
about
extremely
the
happy to
transition.
say
Again,
that
the
their
fourth
babies
graders
went right down the
who
hall, right?
traditionally went off to the
And
middle
not
school
necessarily
thought,
to our a previous model.
parents are extremely
As pertains
happy
to our
say
high
that
school,
their
middle
babies
school
went right down
transition
the hall,
opportunities,
right?
those have been
And
very
not
well
necessarily
received.
to our previous model.
I've had
As
board members
pertains
walk
to our
with me
high
in
school,
the
middle school
buildings
transition
and in the
opportunities,
middle
those
schools,
have been very
and
well
I can say
received.
that they are running very
I've had board
smooth
members
and
walk with me
efficient.
in the
When we
buildings
merge
and
the
in the middle
conversations,
schools,
our
and I
kids
can say
are
that
our
they
kids
are
are
running
resilient,
very
and
smooth and
we
efficient.
forget that they
We merged
are
the
only taking our lead and how we act.
Our kids are
And so
resilient,
I will say that we have
forget
been
that
very
they are
patient
only
with the
taking our
conversation.
lead
We've been
and
very
how we
supportive at the
act.
conversation. But
And so,
to be honest with
I
you,
will say
the
that
kids
we
are
have
happy.
been very,
They're back in
patient
middle
with the
school. They're back in
conversation. We've been
school.
very
They're back in the
supportive of the
conversation of
conversation.
what it means
But
to be a
to
sixth,
be honest
seventh, and
with
eighth
you,
grader,
the
and
kids are happy.
things are
They're
moving
back in
moving
middle school.
along.
They're back in school. They're
Yes,
back
we
in the
we have middle
conversation of
schools, and
what it
naturally
means
there's
to
going
be
to
a
be middle
sixth,
schools
seventh, and
things
eighth
that
grader,
come up.
and things
But
are moving
as it
along.
pertains to
Yes,
how things
we
are
have
going,
middle
they're
schools.
going as well as they
Naturally, there's gonna be
possibly
middle
can,
schools
and I
things that
can't
come
ask for a
up.
better start. I
But
will touch and address,
as it pertains
since you
to
asked,
how things are going, they're going as well as
I
they
will touch
possibly
since you
can,
asked,
and I can't ask for a better start.
the
I
transportation
will
thought.
touch and address
Naturally, there's a lot of
since you
people
asked.
that are we're still
I
getting
will touch
bus
since you
routes
asked,
corrected. We're still
the
getting new
transportation
people
thought.
added to our
Naturally, there's a lot
conversation.
of
We have
people
had an
that
influx of
are still
new riders,
getting
and so
bus
we
routes
are
corrected. We're still
consistently
getting
working on
new people added
getting
to our
that
conversation.
completed.
We have had an
But as it
influx of
stands,
new
kids are
riders,
getting
and
picked
so we
up,
are
kids are getting dropped off, and kids
consistently
are getting dropped
working
off back at home.
on
Get
getting
picked up
that
to go to school, and then of
completed.
course dropped off
But
to go
as it
back home.
stands,
And so
kids are getting picked up,
without a
kids are getting
hitch.
dropped off,
And
kids are getting
I
dropped
would
off
like to
back at
thank
home, picked up
everybody
to
who
go to
has
school,
a
and then
play
of
in
course
that
dropped off
as
to go back
well.
home. And so without a hitch. And
Am I missing
I would like
anything
to
from my
thank
executive
everybody
team?
who has a play in that as well.
Yes.
Um,
Don't want to forget the BLA conversation.
from my executive team?
One of the things that we really focused on was
Yes. Don't want to
not
forget
only
the
making the
BLA
shifts and
conversation.
changes for
one of the
K3
things that we
to
really focused on
K5 to
was
6-8, that conversation. But we
not
also
only
wanted to make
making
sure
the
that our BLA students had a successful transition as well. And since I've been in the building, I haven't seen as many smiles. I've seen so many smiles from our PLA staff. Just being in a building that has air conditioning.
I've seen so many smiles
is a huge thing. Just having stalls that actually fit high school students
is a huge thing.
Is a huge thing, and I know we take some of those things for granted. And our students at BLA, lived in that thought for many years graciously. If I could say, but now they're in a space where things
lived
fit.
in that thought for
And
many years.
they got a hallway to go down, and multiple hallways to go down, right? And it's a good
but now
feeling
they're
for
in a
them.
space where
And I'm happy
things
for the
fit.
transition that BLA has had
They got a hallway to
thus
go
far.
down, and multiple hallways to go down, right?
But
And,
to
and
answer
it's,
your
and it's a
question,
good
thank you.
feeling for them.
Thank you very
And I'm
much.
happy
Yes, ma'am.
for the transition that BLA has had thus far.
Is there any other questions from board members?
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
So just again, thank you to those central enrollment officers and secretaries. We do say thank you. If you think about students, it's really that principal and secretary of those teams in those buildings. As you're serving parents, K through 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, multiple families across the years, and
K through 5,
cousins
6, 8,
and
9,
brothers
12.
and sisters. And then the longer you stay in the district, one of the things that Dr. Elsie said to me once when I worked at Blood Memorial, said, Mr. Lee, if you stay, you'll be here longer than anybody.
And then the longer you
And it's
stay
kind
in
of,
the
it's
district,
like, all right, Dr. Elsie, what does that mean? But the longer you stay in the district, you're working with families. You're working with one family with multiple children.
The longer you stay in the district,
So that longevity that you have in those positions, it means a lot because these are the same people you see at Walmart, at church,
so that longevity that you have in those
in the
positions,
community,
it means
and
a
people
lot
begin to count on you
these are
because they
same
know
people
your
you see at
face,
Walmart,
they know your name.
at church,
And when they're coming to you oftentimes with
in the
administrative things,
and people
I
begin
need
to
this
count on
paper
you because
signed,
they
and
know your face,
is the door
they know
open?
your
Can you
name.
take care of this?
And when they
You
come
are the
to
people on the front line
oftentimes
that
with
do those
administrative
things. So we're
things,
thankful.
I need this
Even
paper
sitting
signed.
here as a board
Is the door
member,
open? Can you take
hey, you
care
one of
of
those
this?
board
You
members.
are the people on the
It
front
don't matter
line
when
that
you're a
do
board
those things. So
member,
we're
but
thankful.
you're one of them.
Even sitting here as a
But for
board
you
member,
all,
hey,
you do
one of
work that
those
matters,
board members.
and you are the
It don't
face of
matter
the
when you're a
district.
board member, but you one of them.
And those feelings that
But for
people
you
have,
all,
you
do work
provide
that
those.
matters, and you are the face of the district.
You help people be at ease about the things that are happening with their children. So we really do want to say thank you and make sure that you understand that from the board that we're appreciative of your work.
About the things that are happening with their
All right.
children. So we really do.
We
want to say
have,
thank you and make sure that you understand.
I gotta
that
find
from
myself in the
board
agenda.
That we're appreciative of your work. All right.
All right. No other
have,
questions from board members? All right.
Find myself
So we're now to committee reports. This is also a transition time if you want to get up and leave.
No other questions from board members.
Feel free to do so.
Committee reports. This is also
All right.
transition
Gotta
time.
remember
If you
that
wanna
part.
get
Gotta
up and
remember that part.
leave. Feel free to do
We're on
so.
target to be a shorter one, but we don't know.
All right. Gotta remember that part. Gotta remember
Right.
that part.
It's okay. Normalize leaving. All
We're on
right.
target to be a shorter one, but we don't know.
All right. Committee and other board reports,
okay.
if needed.
Normalize leaving. All
All
right.
right. Business Operations
All right,
Finance Committee, Teaching, Learning,
committee and
Equity,
other
and Pupil
board
Service,
reports, if needed.
Governance Committee,
All right. Business operations,
legislative
Finance
update
Committee,
and policy.
Teaching, learning, equity, and pupil service. Governance Committee.
Nothing really new to report. Pretty much the same thing that we reported 2 weeks ago after our meeting. So we went over the financials and the
pretty much the same thing.
and
that
the
we
intro,
reported
the
2 weeks ago after
really the first look at
meeting.
the budget. So that was it.
Financials and the
Thank you.
And the
And thank you, Mr. Chady,
really the first look at
for all that work.
So that was it. Thank you.
Nice job to Mr. Nichols for chairing your
Thank you,
first
Mr. Chair.
committee meeting last
For all
time.
that work.
Very cool stuff. So, Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Committee, we looked at and we'll be moving forward in the consent agenda tonight for consideration of approval of the full board, a new course proposal for children's literature. Just to editorialize a little bit, I couldn't be more excited about this proposal. And if you've read the attachment, it's well embedded with the up-to-date standards regarding reading and writing, of course, and it's just a wonderful example of a flexible use of curriculum and understanding the needs of all of our students and the diverse needs of our students to, get them, through different access points to grade level standards in a highly engaging way. I think the proposal of this course speaks very highly to the teamwork that went into this and the vision of Ms. Houston and all of those who supported her in bringing this forward. So I'm just really excited to bring this to the full board for approval this evening. And if anybody has additional questions, you can remove it from the consent agenda. Otherwise, that is pretty much it.
Full board for approval this evening. And if anybody has
The
additional
Governors Committee met on
you can
August
remove it from the
22nd.
consent
We
agenda.
discussed with
Otherwise, that
EUA
is
our
pretty much it.
long-range facility plan and
Governors
also
Committee met on August 22nd.
conversations
We
about
discussed,
operational
EUA,
referendum
our
planning, which
long-range
we
facility plan.
I think advanced at
And
the next
also,
meeting and we'll have some more discussion about that tonight.
Operational referendum planning, which we
For the legislative update, I used my work time between the last two meetings to work on a resolution with Mr. Nichols that we'll be bringing forward later this evening. So I didn't write up a legislative update, but I do have a couple of comments to make. The first is just to remind everybody that the state budget surplus is still at $6 billion with $4.8 billion in a spendable account and 1.2. I think, I'm sorry, 4.2 and then 1.8 is in the rainy day fund. So just like to remind folks that that's where we're at. And because I didn't do a really swell write-up this time, I'm just drawing from a WPR update from today regarding some legislation that's kind of cooking at the state level regarding education. One is, let's see,
regarding some legislation.
Just a couple of highlights here. There's a proposed bill from, let's see, there's a DPI proposal to create an online dashboard about school district finances. It was initially rejected to have private schools that receive public funding participate in the dashboard. But after a lot of struggle back and forth, that was just overturned, I believe, might have been last Tuesday. Did you want to?
But after a lot of struggle back and forth, that was just.
It was just like 5 minutes ago, just to hyperbolize a little bit. But if you don't mind me reading a little bit, I just thought this article did a really nice job, and I sent it to Ms. Shope to publicly post, but you can all find it on WPR.org, Wisconsin Private School Reject. Oh, nope, I'm on the wrong page. There we go. Nope, that's not what I want to look at. Sweeping Democratic education bills to reform voucher school program likely face uphill battle. And so what I thought was of interest and of note to bring up today is there's a set of bills that call for more transparency in the state's private voucher school program and inclusion on property tax bills for transparency for how much the program costs. And the quote from the article that I wanted to highlight, because the bills include raising special education reimbursement from 33.3% to 90%. They would also prohibit discrimination against students with disabilities at voucher schools. For those of you who don't know, in public schools, people ask it's usually a 2/3 reimbursement, which was promised initially at the beginning of the program. We're at about 30% now, which is not anywhere near, of course, the 60+% reimbursement. But private schools actually get up to 90%. And so some legislators at the state level have asked that all public schools endeavor toward a 90% reimbursement rate for special education. So the quote from the article I wanted to highlight is, we must guarantee that disabled students are never discriminated against because of their disability status. State Reps Christina Shelton, Democrat from Green Bay, and Jimmy Anderson, Democrat from Fitchburg, said in a statement, quote, currently voucher schools often use their semi-autonomous standing to violate the civil rights of disabled students by denying their accommodations, excluding them from activities, or even ejecting these students outright. So these bills are being circulated but are not likely to pass. And then further down, I wanted to highlight as well, and then I'll wrap up here.
So these bills are being circulated
in the last budget cycle, private voucher schools received the largest financial expansion in the program's history. Taxpayer funding for kindergarten through 8th grade private choice schools increased from about $8,400 per student to $9,500 per student, with more promised in subsequent years. Funding for private choice high school students increased from $9,045 to $12,000 per student. And then the State Department of Public Instruction had proposed including private school finances in a public dashboard, but the Republican-controlled Joint Finance Committee rejected the proposal last month after a coalition of conservative groups objected to it. However, as Mr. Chady was just pointing out, on Tuesday, the Joint Finance Committee withdrew its objection, meaning private schools will now be added to the dashboard. So there will be that transparency in terms of funding. So that's something that we'll watch for and highlight on future legislative updates. And lastly, the Senate then last week voted to override the Democratic Governor Tony Evers' budget veto that increased funding to public school districts for the next 400 years. So there's still some ambiguity now in terms of what future per pupil funding will look like for public education. So lots of finance stuff. Thanks for enduring my report.
Pupil funding will look like for public education. So lots of finance stuff. Thanks for enduring my report.
Policy.
No great details to report, but the policy committee will next meet on Wednesday, October 4th at 5:30 in the boardroom at CAC.
No great details to report, but the policy.
Okay, we're on to 5, our consent agenda.
4th at 5:30 in the.
Does anyone have a need to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Okay, we're on to 5, our consent agenda.
Okay.
I do. Could we remove?
Does anyone have a need to remove anything from the consent agenda?
All right.
Okay.
Is there a motion for with the removal of item A from the consent agenda? Is there?
Is there a motion? With the removal of the
I move to approve the consent agenda without item A.
Is there a second?
a motion?
So moved by
approve
Board
the
Member
consent
Miller,
agenda
seconded by
without
Board Member
item A.
Brian Anderson. Is there any discussion?
I'll second.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Board Member Miller,
Aye.
seconded by Board Member
Aye.
Brian Anderson.
Aye.
Is there any discussion?
Aye. Motion passes
Hearing none, all those
unanimously.
in favor signify by saying aye.
New course
Aye.
proposal, children's literature. Board Member Levy.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion
I have
passes
several questions,
unanimously.
but I think they'll all be
New
brief.
course proposal,
I'm
children's
always
literature.
excited to
Board
see
Member
new
Levy.
course offerings for students that's engaged
Thank
and
you.
tailored
I have
to
several
them.
questions, but I think
Just
they'll
a
all
few
be
questions
brief.
though. It wasn't
I'm
obvious
always
to
excited
me,
to
and
see
forgive
new
me if I
course
missed it,
offerings for
when
students
the
that's
class is
engaged and
scheduled to
tailored
begin.
them. Just a few questions though. It wasn't obvious to me, and forgive me if I missed it.
They're coming up to answer your questions, Board Member Levy.
Begin.
Thank you.
They're coming up to answer your questions.
That is a second semester course offering, term 3, I believe. Term 4, which would be the last term of the school year.
Second
Oh,
semester
perfect. This
course
year.
offering,
Okay.
term 3.
And then the next question is kind of like 2
4,
or 3 rolled
which
into
would be the
one,
last
so
term
I'll
of the school
rattle
year.
it off. Were students
perfect.
and families
This year.
polled
Okay.
to assess
And then the next
interest
question
in
is
the
kind of like
course?
2 or 3 rolled
And then
into
the
one,
2
so I'll
follow-ups
rattle
on
it
that
off.
is what is our
Were
capacity?
students
So
and
how many
families
students can we
polled
receive for this
to
course?
assess
And
interest
do
in
you
the
have
course?
kind of a level
And
of
then the 2
interest or an
follow-ups on
estimate
that is
for
what
how
is
many
our
students you believe will
capacity? So
enroll?
how many students can we receive for this course?
Well,
And
last year, I did actually talk to quite a few of my students about this course before I took it anywhere else. I have actually spoken to some of their parents at parent-teacher conference, and everybody is really excited. Actually, I had students last year saying, "Why are you doing this next year? I won't be here. Now I can't take it." And they're all really excited that it will be this year so that they can take it. In terms of capacity,
Now I can't take it. And they're
I don't know, my enrollment goes anywhere from, 12 to 30, depending on, the enrollment in the day and the year. So I don't really know how to answer that one. I'm sorry.
12 to 30, depending
Okay,
on,
and it's kind of linked to my
the
next
enrollment in the day
question.
and the
I
year,
see that
so
we've
I don't
allocated,
really know how
the
to answer that
proposed
one. I'm sorry.
allocation for curriculum writing is $1,000.
Okay, and it's
then
kind of linked to my
the dollar
next
per
question.
hour. Number
I
of
see that
hours
we've
is there, so thank you
allocated
for
with the
that.
proposed
But
allocation
the
for
book
curriculum
allocation
writing
is
is
also $1,000.
and
So
then
I'm
the
wondering
dollar per
how many
hour
students are we
number of hours is
expecting?
there,
Have
so
the
thank you
books
for
already
that.
been picked out?
But
And
the
is
book
$1,000
allocation is
enough
also $1,000.
to cover
So
the
I'm
books
wondering
for the
how
students
many
that we
students are
expect to receive in this
expecting? Have the
course?
books already been picked
Very
out?
good
Is it
question.
$1,000
When I wrote this proposal last January, I didn't really know what to put there. So I talked to Brandy Grady and sort of came up with a number.
I didn't really know what to put.
I hope that it will be enough. It's the first time I've done this class, and so we sort of tried to average. I'm not exactly sure. I don't actually have text specifically picked for the class yet either, because I wanted to work with the committee to make sure I'm meeting the equity and multicultural needs of the students. So I hope it's enough.
Meeting the equity.
Okay, so I guess my
and
final question
multicultural
is,
needs of the students.
if in the process
So
of rolling this out,
I
you
hope it's
find
enough.
that number is not adequate.
Okay, so I guess my
and the
final
building
question
principal could
is,
speak to this.
if
Is
in the
there
process of rolling
budgeted
this out,
dollars
you
that we
find
could
that
pull,
number is
that you all
not
could pull
adequate,
from that building
and
to
the
cover
building
the
principal
cost?
could speak
I just
to
want to
this.
make sure that this
Is
course has
there
everything it needs to be
budgeted dollars
successful.
that we could pull, that you all could pull from that building? to cover the cost?
In the past, we've been able to use some Title I money to offset costs for these types of things. So I believe we can help support anything that Ms. Houston might need.
To offset costs
Okay,
for
thank you so
these
much.
types of things. So I believe we can help support anything that Ms. Houston might need.
Anyone else with questions for
Okay, thank you so much.
consent agenda item A?
Anyone else with questions for
Is there a motion for consent agenda item A?
consent agenda?
So
item A?
moved.
Second.
Motion for consent agenda.
Moved by Board Member Schneider and seconded by Board Member Brian Anderson. Is there any discussion?
Second.
Second.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Seconded by Board
Aye.
Member Brian Anderson.
Aye.
Is there any
Aye.
discussion?
Motion passes
Hearing none, all those in
unanimously.
favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we're on to 6A, 23-24 preliminary budget.
And we're on to 6A.
So I would like to kick us off, and then, of course, I'll turn it over to Mr. Chady. Over the past few weeks, we've been talking about our preliminary budget and just kind of making sure that we are keeping with a schedule to meet the needs that we have in front of us. One, of course, is the approval of the preliminary budget. Then, naturally, there's other steps that will follow here in October, leading us to the back end of October to our final budget. And so, Mr. Chady, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Garrison. Thank you to the Board of Education. The opportunity tonight to review with you the 23-24 preliminary budget. Quite honestly, the same presentation that you heard 2 weeks ago, so I'll try to address it at perhaps a little bit higher level. But more importantly, I'd really like to walk through kind of the schedule of events, activities that need to take place between now and the end of October prior to the presentation. So this evening, I'll review again the 23-24 preliminary budget. We'll ask the Board of Education to adopt the preliminary budget, which then will send it to the budget hearing that needs to take place. The budget will need to be published in the Beloit Daily News. 15 days thereafter, we can have the budget hearing. We can schedule the dates in advance of the publication in the newspaper, but there is a statutory 15 days minimum between when it appears in the newspaper and when the budget hearing could take place. So that's tentatively scheduled for perhaps Wednesday, October 11th or Thursday, October 12th.
So that's
subject to the availability of board members to be present for that. Thereafter, at some point, well, let me back up a little bit. So some of the final pieces of the budget puzzle, quite honestly, the big pieces are yet to be determined. So our third Friday count, which of course takes place or took place last Friday, though we get 2 weeks to kind of do the calculation and submit that to the DPI. So that's due here by September 29th. So on the Tuesday, October 3rd Finance Committee, we'll review what that count was. So that's a very large component of the final budget adjustments that take place. On October 1st, the Department of Revenue certifies the equalization or equalized property valuations for the district. That is a key component in the mill rate computation. And then on October 15th, the Department of Public Instruction will certify the final state equalization aid. So those three items are really yet to be determined, will impact the budget. But after that October 15th, I know we've got a regular meeting scheduled for Tuesday, October 17th. It is likely that sometime during the week thereafter, there will be a need for a special meeting for the board to adopt the final budget and establish the tax levy that would be forwarded to the municipality. So that's kind of the big picture of what's to come. But we'll turn our attention now to the 23-24 preliminary budget. And again, the same presentation that we mentioned, so I'll kind of address it perhaps at a bit higher level. The preliminary budget entails a number of assumptions because we just don't have all the values in the data. So we have a presumed number of membership included in the budget, 6,216 resident students, though we'll know what that actual number is here in about a week and a half. We did include the $325 increase in the state per pupil funding as permitted through the biennial budget. So that is built into the preliminary budget. What's missing is that increase to the $11,000 per pupil low revenue limit ceiling. So because of the April 23 operational referendum being unsuccessful, we're unable to fully take advantage of that $11,000 at present.
Being unsuccessful. were unable
Also built into the budgets, we're using hopefully the remaining $12 million in ESSER funds to basically subsidize general operational purposes.
hopefully the remaining
State
$12 million
aids being reduced, salary adjustments yet to be determined. We have pending negotiations with the BEA. Again, a large piece of the budget. We do have a value built into the budget, but we'll kind of withhold that at the present. We also had health plan savings, et cetera. And then finally, increase in costs to support those students that are seeking educational opportunities outside of the school district of Beloit, either through open enrollment or independent charter schools.
that are seeking educational opportunities.
Budget strategies, reducing staffing, some reconfiguration savings. We've made reductions in some department and school level budgets. And then again, the revenues is largely driven by that almost $12 million of remaining ESSER 3 funding.
Budgets. And then again, the
revenue limit calculation, I kind of went through this very detailed a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure that we need to go through it at that level of detail again. The key thing that I would leave with the board is that revenue limit authority there in the middle talks about $67,534,767. Even though this includes the $325 increase per student, our revenue limit authority here for the 23-24 school year will be less than we received in the 22-23 school year.
Authority here for the 23-24 school year will be less.
Revenue limit membership, we've spoken about this. The decline in membership. Perhaps the board had the opportunity to read an article in the Wisconsin School News that talked about declining enrollment statewide, and I think that somewhat speaks to some of those declines. The revenue limit, tax levy, the general aid. The key component here, if you look at the pictorial on the bottom, is that the revenue limit establishes the total amount that we can generate from local property taxes or state aid, and a combined state aid. Roughly $67.5 million. From that, we reduced out the state equalization aid and other high poverty aid, essentially $60,800,850,000, and that then equates out to the allowable limited tax levy. So the amount that we can actually place on the property tax to help pay for the school district operations here in the 23-24 school year. So at present, that value would be just under $5.6 million for general fund purposes and just under $1 million for Fund 38, our debt levy for debt service that was not approved by a referendum. Our revenue sources are exhibited here, and again, pointing out that our state support approaches 74%, and when you add in the federal support, we're approaching 94% there. So the vast majority of the revenues that come into the school district of Beloit come from state equalization aid and other state aid and or federal sources. Very limited, 5.25% of the budget is currently forecast to come from the local property taxpayers.
Very limited, 5.25% of the budget.
A pie chart that indicates the source of revenues by responsibility. You can see state support 74%, federal support is at 18%, and then local support just over 6%.
Federal support.
Do the same for special education. This one's a little bit different because the vast majority of revenue that supports our special education fund expenses is a result of a transfer from the general fund. So you see currently state support forecast to be just over 30%, and then federal support just under 14%.
Currently state supports forecast to be
my water. So expenses by object are listed here as well. Salaries and benefits are the two largest drivers of our expenses within the district are listed there. The next being purchase services. That can go anywhere from transportation to legal expenses to contracted technology, contracted utilities as well fall in there. So
contracted technology, contracted
total overall, $111,900,000 in expenses for operations.
Overall, $111,900,000.
Also presented here is expenses by function area, which kind of spells out how the money is being utilized. I always like to refer to the function code in our account code is really the who, what department is utilizing those funds and how are those funds being applied. So you can see instruction is listed there, 55, 56, 57%. Administration, just over 6.5%. That facilities, transportation, business services, 15.7%, and down the line. Just important to point out, the last three rows all refer to the payment of instructional for School District of Beloit residents that are attending educational opportunities outside of the School District of Beloit, either with another public institution or at a private school or a local charter school.
Outside of the School District of Beloit, either with another public institution.
And then a pie chart again that breaks out those expenditure areas by percentage.
And then a pie chart.
The board's well familiar with this. You could probably speak to this as much as or better than I can. The fund balance over time, and you can see the values that are there. The 223 budget, we're estimating a deficit there of just over $2 million. That audit is still in process. Quite honestly, I do anticipate that number will increase marginally. Not quite sure to what extent that'll end up, but more importantly, we're looking at the continued decline in our fund balance to the point where we're looking at less than 8% of our fund balance being available for us with the current 23-24 budget. So continued use of fund balance over time, not necessarily a good thing. The board has policy that speaks to, I think, 14% being the low, if I recall correctly, 18% being the target, 25% being the top end, and we're certainly far from all of those opportunities currently.
25% being
the tax levy impact. Again, this tax levy impact, I think it's important for us to look at. I don't put a lot of money on it at present because we don't know yet what the certified property valuation will be from the Department of Revenue. And then we also don't know what the final revenue limit calculation will be. But this is a projection, so to speak. Again, a number of years in that $10+ range. This most recent year, 4.77. I actually think it was 4.78, but it could be right in there with the rounding. And next year, currently forecast to be around $2.45.
But it could be right in there with the rounding.
Of course, all of that, what we just spoke about is really in regards to Fund 10, our General Operation Fund, and Fund 27, our Special Education Fund. There are a number of other funds listed on the left-hand column that support various things. Our debt service funds, 38 and 39, help pay for the debt that the district has acquired through the years for various purposes, i.e. the construction, remodeling from 2012, I believe. Community Service Fund is on there as well to support those programming opportunities that the district provides that are open to the community as a whole. So again, this chart, you can look at the beginning balance, and then again, if you take a look at the far right, the ending balance, and kind of compare the values, you could see obviously the amount of revenues and expenses that come in, and probably the best example is the Food Service Fund, Fund 50, where we're providing meals to students on a daily basis. So there's lots of revenues and expenses that are entailed in those activities.
Providing meals to students on a daily basis. So there's
the budget final work, we talked a lot about this. The final student counts are currently in process. We hope to have that done here within the next week, or perhaps a bit more. Thereafter, it provides us the opportunity to review our current staffing. Certified state equalization aid comes on the 15th. At that point in time, we'll be able to compute the final state revenue limit, and then we'll know what the figures are for our charter schools and private school voucher payments also. So that then provides us the opportunity to kind of wrap up, to put a bow on the 23-24 budget. And then we'll need to bring that back to the board for final approval here the end of October by approving the original budget, certifying that tax levy. That has to be performed by November 1st. And then the certification documents need to be delivered to the municipalities by November 6th.
And then the certification
budget publication again, getting that printed. We had in there originally the no later than October 10th. I think it's going to take us a little bit more time to get the budget publication format completed. Our target's to get that to the Beloit Daily News on Thursday of this week, which would permit them to have it published on Monday of next week. And then we can schedule the 15 days thereafter for the budget hearing, again, looking at October 11th or 12th, perhaps.
And then we can schedule the 15 days thereafter for
With
the
that,
budget
I'll
hearing.
pause and
Again, looking at
answer
October
questions.
11th or 12th, perhaps.
First of all, let me just jump in real quick for
With that, I'll
the questions
pause
come. Board members, we also, as we kind of work through the budget naturally, we know there's going to be questions. That's why this is the preliminary budget. We know that once we get to later in the conversation, it gets closer and closer to exactly what it's going to look like. Again, thank you to Mr. Chady and, of course, the department for working with me to put this together. We do spend a lot of times looking at money and looking at, where we're going to get the money from. Here's where we are. I truly believe that, naturally with the people that we have in place, we'll continue to work on figuring things out. But as it stands, this is our preliminary budget. And I'll turn it back over to the board for questions.
On figuring things out. But as it
So I
stands,
just want to begin to
I'll turn it back over to
take questions from board members. We'll start with Board Member Levy. See your hand.
Thank you. Just one
questions
question,
from board
Mr. Shady.
members.
Thank you
We'll
for
start
the
with Board Member
presentation
Levy.
again.
See
Could
your
you
hand.
explain to us what happens to a district Thank when you. your fund balance Just one hits question, zero? Mr. Shady. Thank you for the presentation again.
Sure, great question.
To a district
So
when
before
your
we
fund
talk
balance
about when the fund balance hits zero, let's back up a little bit
Great question.
because there are things that will occur prior to us essentially exhausting our fund balance.
Back up a little bit
And
because there are
a good
things
example would would be that it is my anticipation that the district will likely have to short-term borrow here in the 23-24 school year in order for us to meet our day-to-day obligations of paying our staff through payroll and or paying our vendors. I actually have a meeting with our financial institution, Blackhawk Bank, Thursday morning, afternoon, doesn't really matter, Thursday, to discuss what's necessary from their perspective to secure that line of credit and the paperwork that we need to do. So that too will be coming before the Finance Committee on October 3rd is the timeline that we're looking at there, and then to the full board later in the month. So coming back to your question, Ms. Levy, one, when we need to short-term borrow, we're essentially taking out a loan with a financial institution, and we're then incurring interest expense, which is our effort to try to avoid, right? I mean, if we're paying money to somebody to use their money, that's not good. Going the next step is as we continue to draw upon and consume our fund balance, there could very well be a point in time where the district runs out of fund balance and has no money there. And the best way to explain that and to put it in simple terms that people will understand is the district essentially becomes bankrupt. We have no funds, we have expenses, obligations, but we have no money to pay for it. I hope to help us prevent that, and I certainly don't want to be here if that were to occur. So
I hope to help us prevent that.
But hopefully that cuts to the chase and answers your question then.
Almost. I'm going to push you a little bit.
But hopefully
what happens when
that
our
cuts
fund
to the
balance
chase and
is
answers your
depleted?
question then.
And I know you said you don't want to be here for that.
Almost. I'm going to push you
I
a little bit.
understand. But what does that
What
look
happens
like?
when our fund balance
I was going to ask Mr.
I know
Chady,
you said you don't want to
when would you be leaving? When will we know that, hey, Bob left?
What does that look like?
Trust me, I'll let you know that the problems are in the horizon.
What happened is naturally
Trust me, I'll let you know.
the state then looked at us a little bit differently as well. Not being able to pay your bills, the state then has conversations around, what are we doing financially?
Not being able to pay.
We're far from a conversation around a takeover because we are not that district where that's going to happen. School District Beloit is here, and we're here to stay. And so we have to work through this conversation as accordingly. But again, answer your question, Board Member Levy, naturally the state then starts looking at us as pertains to not being a financially stable school district, and then they start asking us additional questions around what we're going to do to become more financially stable. Additionally, other banks will, again, like any bank, will stop loaning to you. And you don't want that to ever happen because, again, we have bills to pay. Naturally, we got teachers that are in classrooms teaching, and again, not being able to pay your teachers could create additional conversations as it pertains to
classrooms teaching,
and school pause and all that extra stuff that, again, we're not. That's not the direction we're going in. And I know Mr. Chayton mentioned, he's not going to be here, but we all are in this to make it right and to get it right.
Mr. Chayton mentioned, he's not going to be here.
The statement is really centered around we're going to do what we need to do to make sure that doesn't happen.
Exactly. The other thing that came to my mind as well is, the continued utilization and depletion of fund balance. Lenders look at that as well, right? So it doesn't matter if we're looking to borrow our line of credit or if we're looking to borrow money for school improvements. Lenders look at that, and when they see the continued decline, guess what happens with interest rates? Their risk goes up too, right? So how do they compensate for their risk? They increase your rate if they're comfortable with providing that line of credit or lending to you.
How do they compensate for their risk? They increase your rate.
Yeah, that's a challenge. A couple of other things just real quick. A couple of districts come to mind, and some of you may have been around long enough or connected to public education, but if you think about the Palmyra Eagle School District and the challenges that they had 4 or so years ago, memory serving me correctly, some financial challenges. They were looking at perhaps detaching and closing the district and then attaching to neighboring districts. And then going back maybe 6 to 8 years ago, I believe it was the Florence School District that was in a more dire position than the school district of Beloit is currently. And the state had to come in and help them with correcting some of their financial challenges as well. So we're ways from that, and I don't want us to go there.
Board Member Lee, I did step on your question. Just want to make sure you had a chance to ask that fully. Did you get all things answered, or I just really wanted to know what the warning signs would be. But so did you get all your questions?
You circling back and getting
answered, or I just really wanted to know what the warning signs would be. But so did you get all your questions?
I don't want a chicken little moment circling back and getting clarification. But we are closer to 0 than we are 25. And I would just encourage the rest of my colleagues to make decisions that are in line with getting us closer to 25 than to 0. That's all. Thank you.
To make decisions that are in line with getting us closer to 25.
Other board members, questions?
That's all. Thank you.
I just had a clarifying question. I'm looking at, I think it's slide 12. Let me pull it up. It's the one with the pie chart that says expenditures by function, funds 10 and funds 27. I just want to make sure, am I reading this correctly, that about 21% of that pie chart is funds going to private school vouchers, charter school payments, and other open enrollment?
That pie chart is funds to private school vouchers.
Not sure that it's quite that high, but it is significant. If we look at the expenses by function and we look at those last 3 rows, 15, 16, 17-ish percent.
Okay, yeah, well, on the pie chart, that's why I want to make sure I'm reading this right. It looks like 9.2 plus 6.5. Am I looking at that correctly? Then plus another 6 is like 21.7%.
It looks like 9.2 plus 6.5 Am I looking at that correctly? Then plus another 6 is
So
like
it looks to me to be the 9.2, 1.7, and 6%.
I was looking at the wrong green. Okay, that makes me feel like
So it
slightly
looks to me
better,
to be
but
the
it's still
1.7
that's an extremely high chunk of that pie chart, and I realize that's only reflective of 2 of our funds. But the reason that I want to point that, first of all, I wanted to make sure I was reading right. So thank you. Secondly, it's popular to say, and I agree with the statement that what we budget for is really like what the strategic plan. It like I mean, so somebody just with me the other day, and I think of Mr. Nichols actually and I are having a conversation, but this is something that comes up a lot, right? Whether you're talking about like politics or your local school district, how you spend your money is reflective of what your real priorities are. And unfortunately for our school district, we don't have a choice in where these dollars are going. And I want to make that point because as we're considering the next 2 agenda items about how we fund and finance, academic growth and children in our community, we're bound not only by statutes and regulations. We're bound by the fact that the state has decided that, like you said, it's about 15%-ish in there. About 15% of our largest funds that are intended to go directly to the instruction of children cannot go there.
About 15%.
Like it's being dictated to us that we cannot spend those dollars on kids in our own community who have needs. And I think all of us on this board would agree that our number one priority is raising that academic achievement, right? Which is like what we've all been elected. We've all been elected to sit here and help direct the vision of the school district to increase academic growth and do what's best for our kids and meet their needs. And unfortunately, we're not even allowed as a school board to allocate those funds in a way that is reflective of those values, right? And so I want to point that out because it's easy to kind of make a comment, and you can actually, I agree with that sentence, generally speaking, look at where the money's going, there's your priorities. We're not even allowed to allocate all of the funds that we supposedly have to the priorities that we have in our district, which is, again, academic growth for our kids. So I just, thanks for hashing that through with me, and I hope that we're able to communicate that effectively to our community, essentially. We're trying to be good stewards of our funds, and we're being told by the state that we cannot spend our funds the way that we want to.
We're trying to be good stewards of our funds, and we're being told by the state that we cannot spend our funds.
Other board members, questions?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Mr. Shady, thank you for the presentation. I think that we've talked,
Yeah, I'll jump in. Mr. Shady,
a lot of work goes into doing a budget, so I appreciate that. And
I think that we talked
about the revenues and expenses, and I think we have such little control over the revenues, right? We talk about it, but that so much of that is just dictated to us.
And I think we have such little control
other than
over revenues, right? We talk about
our option of potential referendum, which we'll talk about later tonight. So when I say the focus is on expenses, we've also had the discussion going back to our last referendum attempt was we can't cut our way out of the problem, right? But
going back to our
I think to focus on the expenses makes sense because to focus on revenues doesn't
problem, right?
Doesn't really get us anywhere because we have so few decisions to make there.
Makes sense.
And I think that the budget that gets presented, whether it's to the paper,
because we have so few decisions,
public in general,
and I think
to the board, is
the budget that gets presented, whether it's
there needs to be enough. Transparency. I think there's going to be a direct correlation between.
There needs to be enough
the granularity and transparency in the budget that we present and the success of any potential referendum that we may go for. And so this is a very high level preliminary budget.
And transparency in the budget that we present.
When do we start to see
referendum that we may go for? And so
the more
this is a very high level
granular aspects, the year over year. Here's what we spent last year on this. Here's what we're budgeting this year. We have this many.
Here's what we spent
less students, or just that kind of granularity, so that when the public comes to us, because we may make an ask to the public,
granularity, so that when the public comes,
we have
to us,
that arrow in our quiver to
make an ask to the public
to put that information out there in a positive way and point back to the strategic plan and say,
put that
well,
information out there.
here's the budget, but
and point back.
Here's where our goal is to get to.
Strategic
right.
plan.
So I think that's got to be the message to it. And just
here's the budget.
If you can talk about when do we get to that point?
Yeah.
Our goal is to get to.
So a couple of things. One, the year-over-year comparison. Parts of the document that we have to send to the Beloit Daily News for publications will list high-level expenditures by function on the left-hand side. It then lists the, let me get my years right, 21-22 actual. It'll list the 22-23 unaudited expenses and then the 23-24 budget expenses. So it essentially provides kind of a 3-year snapshot of where those expenses are occurring. So that'll provide that year over year. Looking for the greater detail, I think that you and perhaps other board members are searching for as well. Typically, during the budget hearing or a budget book is produced, and we're beginning that work within the business office now to, one, look at what the district has used for budget books in the past, what my experience has been, what Stephanie Elwood, our Director of Finance experience has been in Green Bay and Howard Swamico, and trying to pull the best practices from those documents that we can into incorporating something that's a bit more stronger and more robust for us locally. So that document should be available mid to late next week in advance of the budget hearing, which would be scheduled here in the mid part of October.
Late next week in advance.
It's a lot that goes into building out a budget that not only you want to see as a board, right, but also what a community wants to see. And there's a level of functionality that the board has to operate from, and a level of granularity that we have to also.
And there's a level of functionality that the board has to operate from, and a level of granularity.
I'll keep it very brief. In my experience,
that we have to.
Too much is too much, because then it's.
In my experience,
where's all this? What is all this, right? But then too little is too little.
Much is too much.
Then it's like, okay, well, that's not enough. And so we have to still find what's been a good
too little is too little
recipe for the school district of Beloit. But in my experience, that level of functionality is what a board is supposed to operate from. And then, of course, we bring in some of those granular details to provide a better context as it pertains to where our budget is. And how we're going to actually move forward and making some changes. So you're right to ask the question. It is our job to try to bring, like Mr. Shady mentioned, and like I'm saying now, a level of granularity to the conversation, but also allow the board to remain in the functionality of the conversation to move, these conversations forward.
Allow the board to remain in the functionality.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and that's I appreciate the different areas of expertise that you try to keep the board at a certain level or whatever. But I'll tell you,
that's I appreciate
too much is too much, too little is too little. Areas of expertise. I absolutely appreciate that. I can tell you if I'm talking to my neighbor. You can say, hey, we spent $12 million on this function.
Absolutely appreciate that.
That is not meaningful, right? And so we have to have enough so that we can have the conversations, whether it's
on this function,
board members having conversations, staff having conversations, you're going to have a lot of conversations, So I mean, I just want to express that. You're going to have a lot of. I guess your job is to find the sweet spot for each of your different audiences, right?
I just want to express that. I guess your job is to
other
find
board members' questions.
The sweet spot for each of
I have
your
a
different
question
audiences,
on
right?
the slide that's titled Tax Levy
Other board
Impact.
members' questions.
I have a question on the.
So in the 2018-2019 school year, the mill rate was 11.73, and this year's
school year, the mill rate
projected mill rate is that correct? Is 2.45?
That's, you're correct in reading it in that fashion, yes.
Okay, so that's a difference of 9.28. So for a $100,000 home and Beloit median house value is roughly 144, 150, somewhere in there, depending on who you speak to. But if you have a $100,000 home, so that's a tax difference of over $900.
But if you have a
So
$100,000
if we
home,
had
that's a
the mill rate that they had back in 2018, 2019, and considering all the inflation and increase in cost,
the mill rate that they had back in 2018, 2019, and considering all the
I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I would say that, if we were able to continue that $10-ish mill rate through the last few years,
I would say that
the district would be in a much different financial position that we are in currently.
Through the last few years,
that would have been very advantageous for the district.
Much different financial position that we are in
so
currently.
And correct me if I'm wrong in my thinking on this.
Yes.
So if somebody has $100,000 home, and I know there's fluctuations year to year on values and whatnot, but just roughly, so a person's taxes for a $100,000 home contributed by the school district of Beloit has decreased roughly $900.
Yes.
Contributed by the school district
and
of Beloit
yet
has
I
decreased.
can't find somebody who's in need of a home that can find affordable housing.
And yet,
in fact, according to the
GBEDC,
the Greater Beloit Economic Development Corporation, I think,
to the GBEDC,
over 45% of housing are cost burden or they're paying 30% or more going towards housing costs. And of that, 20% is above 50%. And so I'm concerned about what people of Beloit can afford, but I'm also wondering for the people who are property owners, which I'm one myself, who have rental units.
The people who are
what are you doing with the extra $900?
I'm one myself who have
rental
units.
Well, I can again. I've always stated this. It is our job to educate the students that come to the school district of Beloit with what we are provided, and we will continue to do that as a school district.
That come to the school
but it does come to a point where we will need help.
We'll continue to do
and right now, as you can tell, $2.45, and that could be lower.
We
just
help.
Or higher,
by a couple cents.
45 cents, and that could be lower.
It's one of those things where we go from $4.77, $4.78 to $2 or lower.
It's one of those.
And this is just these are bigger conversations that not only the school district are having to deal with, but also our city. We'll also have to take up at some point as well. It does cost to educate our kids, and it does cost for anybody to send their kids to our schools, as it would be anywhere. And so I just want to make sure we note that, again, it is still our responsibility to educate all our kids with whatever we have, but it will come a point where we will have to ask for additional support in that conversation. I believe Board President Mrs. Levy has her hand up. Sorry.
Additional support.
Board Member Levy, I see your hand. Just checking. Anybody else in the room have any other comments or questions?
Board Member Levy, I see your hand.
Okay, Board Member Levy.
Anybody else in the room?
Really quickly, Mr. Shady, is it accurate? Am I understanding this correctly? With our drop from 1010 to 477 was because there was an investment in debt prepayment, and so that portion of the equation that makes up your mill rate, we were no longer able to access, which is good because we were prepaying debt, which saved us interest. But the only way to keep that mill rate from crashing from 10 to 4.77 to $2.45 would have been if the referendum passed. So in theory, had that referendum passed, we could have gone back up close to that $10 mill rate. So people would just go back to what they were normally paying, but the benefit to the school would have been an extra source of funding for all of the things that we laid out in the referendum, and also the opportunity to replenish our fund balance. Am I understanding that correctly? For all of the things that we laid out.
Pretty close, but hopefully I can provide some clarity to that for you and the board and the public as well. So the reduction in the mill rate from 1010 in the 21-22 school year to 477, 478 in the 22-23 school year, that $4.77 value included the collection of additional
that
debt service funds to then use to prepay our Fund 39 debt. So those funds were essentially collected early, thereby bolstering the mill rate to 477 from what would have been a lesser value. That prepayment of the debt has not yet occurred. I actually have a meeting with Baird tomorrow afternoon, and we'll be talking about the timing of that prepayment and that debt defeasance. So we'll likely be coming back to the school board here within the next, 2 to 4 months probably in regards to that. If the April of 23 referendums, plural, would have passed, the mill rate in the 23-24 school year should have been or would have been approximately $4.77. So it would have stabilized the mill rate at that 477 level, perhaps a slight uptick, but I believe I recall it remaining fairly stable. So I think, your points or your questions were good, but hopefully that clarity helps answer that.
So I think,
and provide more updated information to you in the public.
Helps
no,
answer
that was helpful. So is there another way to get our mill rate back up to not even the $10, but the $5?
No, that was helpful. So is there another way to get our mill rate back up?
We would have to,
even the $10.
well, naturally the board have to decide whether or not we're going to go to operational referendum, and that'll come with a overall, what would, right now, it'll come with the request to,
referendum, and that'll come.
it will come with a higher request to get us to that number,
right now,
if that makes any sense.
And with the request.
So last year we were at, let's just say $24 million to keep us at $4.78. Now we've dropped below that number to $2.45. So we would have to ask for even more possibly to get us back up to
that number.
$4.78. Or if we want to go higher than that, even more money to get us up to the $5 or to the state average, which is around $7.70. And so
want to go higher than that.
It's really the flavor of which the public would have to get behind and approve it for us to get to 477 and or higher than that to $5 you just mentioned, or higher than that to 770. It'll come into multiple millions of dollars.
Yeah, the two largest factors that influence the mill rates are going to be one, the total equalized property valuation of the district.
Two largest factors.
So if equalized property valuation increases, generally that helps reduce the mill rate component. And then two would be the revenue limit computation, how much state aid you get, and then really how much then can go towards the local property tax base. As part of that revenue limit calculation would be operational referendum considerations, and if the district were successful, that then would be built into the revenue limit calculation and then help to increase the mill rate.
That would be
lots of factors at play.
Revenue limit calculation and then help to increase the mill rate.
Board Member Miller.
Thank you. All right, a couple of things, and I'm just going to make a forest through the trees comment quickly here. So the people who have decided to systematically defund education from all the children in this community and every community in Wisconsin are all of the state lawmakers who have voted on budget after budget over the past several years to systematically defund public education. And if you look, and I can share the document out another time, but there's a document that was produced like 2 years ago at the state level that shows how for the last 16 years, so the kids who are graduating have never attended a fully funded public education entity in the entire state of Wisconsin. And when I say that, I mean it's been systematically underfunded per, and I'm going to make sure I say this correctly, according to the rate of inflation. So you can see like $1 per dollar per pupil decrease up against the rate of inflation for the last 16 years.
So you can see like $1.
So that's the entire state. That's not just Beloit. That's all of the children in Wisconsin. Okay, so that's what we're working with. So the point that I want to make here is
all of the children
Board Member Johnson hit the nail right on the head. People are struggling with housing. Everybody's struggling in all of these ways. And it works to the advantage of whomever, for whatever reason, is interested in watching the failure of public schools.
And it works to
And
the
I'll just say that
advantage of
something, just to
whomever, for
editorialize a little
whatever
bit,
reason,
something that we
is
just don't hear
interested
people talk
in
about anymore
watching
is the
failure
common
of
good.
public schools.
And all of us are on
And
this
I'll just
board.
say that
All of us
something, just to
ran for this
editorialize a little
position
bit,
because we
something that we
care,
just don't
despite
hear
whatever our own
people talk about
politics
anymore
or
is the common
specific interests
good.
are, because we care about the
And all of
common
us
good
are
of our
on this
community
board. All of us
and
ran
whichever
for
way
this
we get
position
there.
because we
And
care,
money is a
despite whatever our own
mechanism
politics or
to
specific
impact
interests are,
and
because
to
we care about
affect
the
that
common
common
good of our
good. So of course
community.
it's important to have
And
this
whichever
discussion.
way we get
So if
there.
I go back to my notes
And
here,
money is a
we're still in a state that has a
impact and to
$6
affect
billion
that common
budget
good. So of course
surplus,
it's important
and
to
we're
have this
asking our
discussion.
property
So if I go back to my
taxpayers
notes here, we're
to
still
argue.
in a
We're
state that
fighting
has
over
a $6
scraps for people who can
billion
barely
budget
afford
surplus.
it by
And we're
design.
asking our property
Not because
taxpayers,
anybody in this
to
room
argue- we're
has
fighting over
erred in
scraps
any
for people who can
significant or
barely afford it
substantive way, although
by
nobody is
design.
perfect, right? And of
Not
course, every
because
action hasn't been
anybody in this
100%,
room
everybody,
has
hindsight
erred in any
2020,
significant or
right? But the
substantive way,
point
although
is
nobody's
that by
perfect, right?
design,
And of course,
we're
every action
asking
hasn't been
local
100%,
property taxpayers
hindsight
to
2020,
be
right?
leaner
But the point
in a
is that by
situation where the
design,
state has
we're
$6 billion
asking local
sitting in a
property
surplus
taxpayers
after
to be
16
leaner
consecutive years
in a
of
situation where the state
underfunding
has
public
$6
schools.
billion sitting in a surplus.
So that's like the whole
After
picture.
16 consecutive
So that's
years
I need to say that, and I hope with our administration and in our communication and however we decide to move forward, whether or not we vote to go to referendum or whenever it occurs, that has to be clearly messaged that we're all in this community on the same team.
Whether or not we vote
All of us in Beloit benefit in a common good way from having children wherever they go to school locally to have a fully funded school that can meet their needs.
From having
Hard
children
stop.
wherever they go to school.
All right. Now, I did have two, originally when I wanted to speak, I had two questions. Board Member Anderson, I loved everything that you had to say. And I want to add on to that. One thing that I think would be really important in terms of when figuring out what's too much and what's too little, something I hear a lot from people is if we could identify not just like the funds that we're spending, but like the extent to which some of these, like the extent to which what are we spending out of which fund that came from ESSER. ESSER is a popular concern that people have. It's gotten a lot of, media publicity, and I think people are right to ask those questions and be concerned. And I think that very much to Board Member Anderson's point, we have an opportunity to garner a lot of trust by being very transparent about like what is the composition of these funds. Like what comes, you've got this beautiful pie chart about like the, percentages about state allocation. So if we could say like when we spend these Fund 27 dollars, like this percent of Fund 27 comes from these sources, I think that just helps build understanding for people. So people have like more access points to understand like what this budget is, because to Dr. Garrison's point, it's just like a whole lot of stuff. So if we could talk specifically about that. And then the other thing too is if we could, and you probably are already going to do this, but if we could just to the best of our ability, very visually and clearly align like just those generalized expenditures, at least to the strategic plan. Like, right, like this is like, here's all of our Fund 27, like special ed stuff, and like here's how like this and this expenditure are like priorities 1 through 4. You know what I'm saying? Just something that's like, so people can kind of draw those lines, because I don't think it's about having everybody in the community like be totally fluent in like the whole budget. I think it's more just about people having access, like if they have specific, concerns. So I just wanted to elevate that comment, and those were the thoughts that came to mind while he was speaking.
Like if they have
Cool,
specific,
thanks.
concerns. So I just wanted to elevate that comment, and those were the thoughts that came to mind.
So I had a couple, and I'll try to move us on, but just, you said that this school year, the 22-23 year budget is looking at about $2.1 million deficit. Just a recap of what was the beginning projected deficit for this school year, the last one?
$2.1 million deficit just
for the 22-23 budget.
Right.
Okay. Memory serving me correctly, I believe at kind of the budget building onset, I think it was like around 10 million.
I believe
at the time of the budget hearing in October of last year, I think it was at 4.4 million. And I anticipate that the district will end the 22-23 school year with a deficit of probably around 2.4 million.
So just in that
23 school year with a
went from 10 million projected deficit to 4.4 million. and where we might actually come out with our audited funds.
Projected deficit.
We got it down to,
million.
You said 3.4,
2.4
to 2.4.
Yeah.
So
Funds.
we made adjustments
We got it down to
so that we didn't have the
3.4.
potential
2.4.
complete negative outcome.
So we made adjustments.
We also put questions on the ballot
Potential.
to address what we see.
We also
The voters had an opportunity to vote yes or no
to address what we see.
with the information that was available,
The voters had an opportunity to vote yes or no.
and we had time for people to say no,
with the information that was
which is what
available.
happened. So now we come into this school year,
Time.
the budget begins with a projected $4 million deficit.
So now we come to this school year.
Going back
Budget begins with a
8 weeks or so, I would say the budget deficit was in the $4 million range, yes.
Okay, so we're going to project it to be $4 million short.
Weeks or so.
We currently have about $7.6 million in the fund balance.
Okay, so we're going to.
That would be at the end of the 23-24 school year, yeah.
We currently
Alright.
have about 7.6
So
million in the
if
fund
we don't make any adjustments, and we have to take that from, well, first of all, before we get to that, we're also going to need to short-term borrow this year.
If we don't
That's
make
the
any
projection.
adjustments, and we have to take that
And
from.
so
first
if
of all,
we
before get
don't
to
make
that,
any
we're also gonna need
adjustments
a
and we just have to use
short-term
fund
borrow
balance to cover the
as a
negative
projection.
difference, we would end the year at about
So
3.6
if we
million.
Don't make any adjustments.
So
we just have to use fund
between
balance to
zero
cover
and
the
us,
negative difference.
3.6
We
million.
would end the year at about.
And then the
3.6
budget
million.
for the
So.
24-25 school year
3.6 million.
projected deficit
And then the budget for the
is around 12 million.
24.
The number you've given us before.
Yeah, so keeping in mind that the 23-24 budget has embedded in it about $12 million worth of ESSER 3 funding to support our operational needs. About $4 million of that is tied to the HVAC work underway at Beloit Memorial, but that means $8 million of it is essentially recurring expenses. So right away, we're looking at an $8 million hole in the 24-25 school year.
$8 million hole with only 3.6 million.
Right away, we're looking at an $8
possibly in the fund balance to cover it.
24-25 school year.
So again, we will have conversations about operational referendum
So
and action in April 2024 or action in November 2024 or action in both of them.
And
because if you don't have any money, you can't have a school.
Or action in November 2024.
So again, the information will be presented to voters and you'll have a choice.
Money, you can't have a school.
Do you want to have school or not?
So again, the information will be presented to voters and you'll have a choice. Do you want to have
And
school?
this time you have less time because you're closer to zero now than you were before.
And this time you have less time.
So going to our strategic plan, objective A is a stabilized budget. That's why we asked for the money when we asked for it, so we could stabilize budget. Because at that time, we didn't know what the state would do,
We asked for the money.
but we knew that if we asked, and there's a possibility that people say yes, possibility people say no,
State would do.
but is this an act that will stabilize our budget?
Possibility people say yes.
The school district of Beloit will build and present a stable budget while supporting the goals, effectiveness, and longevity of the district.
The school district
Longevity of the
A
district.
stable budget while supporting the goals, effectiveness, and longevity of the district.
So a question I would have asked at other budgets in the last 2 years is, what if, as you present the 2023-24 preliminary budget,
What if
and you're telling me on September 19th that it's going to be $4 million short.
Preliminary budget.
If we said that's not acceptable, give us a budget where we come in at $0
$4 million
of deficit.
If we said that's not
Because
acceptable,
in the
give
last
us
two
a
budgets,
budget where we come
that
in
didn't
at
happen
$0
for whatever those deficit numbers were. Just
because
I know there's some things that need to happen, but just kind of explain that scenario. This is unacceptable. We can't be $4 million short because we don't have it. Bring us closer to zero.
just kind of explain that scenario.
So
This is
one of the things
unacceptable.
that
Can't be 4 million.
we would have to take a look at it again in the areas of where we spend the most money, which will be in our staffing.
One of the things
Naturally, there's a third-party
have to
count
take a
that comes
look
with
at
this
is in the
conversation,
areas of
and not
where
to
we
bank
spend the most
everything
money,
on
which
just
will be
third-party
in our
count, but it is a very important number
naturally, there's a
that
third-party
we
count that
are
comes with this
having to look at.
conversation.
Unfortunately, again, with the state budget, that was not in our favor due to the unsuccessful referenda. Even if we had an increase in students, we wouldn't necessarily be able to see some of those additional funds because of how the current budget was given to us from the state. So we would have to look at an area of staffing
current budget
cuts
was given to
if
us
we were to bring you additional $4 million
in area of staffing
and to bring it closer to zero. Now, in our current budget, we also have already projected to hold certain positions
to bring it
already.
To zero.
We're already holding at least 35 positions in this current budget. Now, we currently have about 70 or so positions of still open in our school district in various places throughout our school district. That will mean that we would have to go
still open in our
even higher into that conversation. Whenever you're starting to have more of those conversations, what happens is services to students, and then naturally you add more burden on to the people who are already doing the work. And that's we start creating that domino effect. Now, what I had to do was build that 35 number in there to keep us from saying $6 million in the hole, as an example. And so
to keep us from saying
it is our responsibility. It is some things that we have to continuously look at, but that's just in one area.
And so
additionally, we have to start looking at our contracted services as well. Some certain services that we provide are contracted out, and there may have to be cuts in that area as well. We did see some significant changes in our insurance for the better. And so I'm not sure if we can get additional cuts there because we are, seeing some favorable numbers there.
I'm not sure if
we also in last year's budget we had to look at possibly,
seeing some favorable
creating a package for more retirements. But if we were to get to that, we have to look at furlough and days as a possibility as well. There's a lot of different things, and my caveat that we would have to possibly take a look at. But when you're talking about furlough and days, now you're talking about students not being in school. Now you're talking about people not getting paid. And again, you asked the question, so I'm gonna give you a response.
That's why I asked it.
Correct. Thank you. But those are the things that we would have to. And I always say that because you ask the question, I'm gonna respond.
Well, I asked the question.
Those are things that we'll have to take a look at. And those are some heavy
because those are some of the questions that different citizens, community members ask. Well, don't accept a negative budget.
Because those are some of the questions that different citizens, community members
ask. So what does
that
look like? Maybe not 180 days of instruction for students. One of the things you said.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
So
because we would have to start looking at
180 days of
ways in which we have to make cuts.
One of the things you said
across the board.
Right.
Like
because we would have to
nothing is off the table when we start having that type of conversation. It's just like any other business. Right. You start looking at all different types of ways and to possibly, save whatever funds you have.
Right,
right, and so,
but it's not going to. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But it's not going to replenish fund balance.
Right, and so
it's not. There's still things that we would still have to ask for support to get that number back up to 14%. And we've already stated we can't go to 14%. We really need to be at 18%. That keeps us somewhere in the middle, but gives us somewhat of a cushion. But our policy gives us, and parliamentarian, you can correct me, I thought it was 24%.
That keeps us somewhere in the middle.
I know you mentioned 25 earlier, Mr. Chase. So
the policy says it's a goal, so that we avoid short-term borrowing.
That's correct.
So I mean, those things are there.
The policy says it's a goal. So that we
as far as the projected budget, I'm in that space.
So I mean,
like I said, just kind of make things real simple for people to understand how much money we have, when the money we have would run out.
Like I said, just kind of
and I heard you clearly say that. Well, there's some other things that are in there because if I didn't do that, it would have been negative $6 million. So that would be like
say that. Well, there's some other
almost you got not 1 year in you. It would have been negative. Almost this would be the last year. So and there's other things that you plan to do to help us come in not at $4 million.
This would be the last year.
But to end up at zero,
that you plan to do
which doesn't increase the fund balance, just make sure that we come in at zero.
But
so our 7.6 would still be there again,
which doesn't increase the fund balance.
That would mean a drastic change to school this year.
So our
and the experience that our students would have and our workers.
There are certain positions that I have to still hire for, and those positions are, you know, of course, in the special education world where we are, you know, not necessarily bound by law, but we're bound by law to have certain services to provide those services. Now, I can be honest, and again, I'm never not being honest. You know, I will be having additional conversations around the current position that we currently have open still, holding those positions as well, to bring us closer to, you know, not necessarily $4 million, but it'll still bring us down to probably $2 million. Because this is the preliminary budget. As we work through not having to, you know, not hire people, but that is some of the things that I will have to start taking a look at. If we're going to go deeper into those cuts, it'll have to look at other options. Because even if I didn't hire that whole 77 or 70 some odd people, we would still have conversations around we need funds. I'm not sure if it's going to cover the $4+ million. We will still have conversations around to bring you a zero budget. We need funds. I'm not sure if it's going to cover.
So those are the only questions or comments that I have. I'm ready to move to the next space because I think it's clear where we're at. So we'll take that as a discussion. You will be presenting to us numbers.
Space because I think it's clear.
We'll look at those numbers again.
So we'll take that
have conversations. 2324 resolution to support a referendum.
We have to approve the preliminary budget
2324 resolution
to move it to
the paper.
To the paper, correct. To the budget hearing. Thank you.
I move that we adopt the preliminary budget as presented.
To the paper.
Second.
To the budget hearing.
It's been moved by Board Member Schneider, seconded by Board Member Amy Levy. Is there any discussion
Second.
of our preliminary budget with projected $4 million deficit?
Board Member Amy Levy. Is there any discussion?
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
$4 million deficit.
Aye.
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 Okay.
All right. All those opposed signify by saying nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
All right.
Okay.
All those
So that's
opposed signify by
5-2.
saying nay.
The preliminary budget with a negative $4 million deficit projected is moved forward. We'll have more opportunity to discuss that as it goes forward.
Deficit projected is move forward. We'll have more opportunity to discuss that as it goes forward.
Resolution to support a referendum.
So, hey, so at governance committee meeting, we had a conversation about just generally speaking about the referendum. And one of the ideas that came out of that meeting back in August was for the board to put together some resolution language around why, kind of like what our why is, kind of collectively, and to create a unified vision because, again, you know, we're in our lane is to sort of direct vision for the school district. So given that,
in our lane,
Board President Levy, you've already sort of talked about, you know, the strategic plan, and the stabilizing budget is priority number 5, is what I was reading in our packet there. And underneath that strategy is around kind of a structurally balanced operating budget. And we just heard this exhaustive presentation about how it's necessary to increase those revenues in order for us to stabilize our budget. So after we talked about this at our last meeting, I had already sort of volunteered to write some language around that to bring this evening. So I reached out to Board Member Nichols. He had asked a lot of really good questions at the last meeting. We're not on a committee together, so it was like easy for us to kind of chat through. And the two of us sat down. The earliest we were able to meet was yesterday morning, and so I'm so sorry that we weren't able to post something for Friday. But the language that we came up with for the resolution that's been posted is an outcome of the conversations that we rehashed through kind of representative of what we understood the board to say at our last meeting, along with some information that Dr. Garrison and his team were kind enough to provide for us. And so, and I guess just kind of my last thoughts here is as we're looking through what this resolution language says, it's very broad and general and really just serves to kind of iterate the point that our budget is a mechanism by which we carry out, you know, the work of growing our children's academic achievement. And I think something that's central and something something that I'm very proud that Board Member Nichols was very adamant about including was the language around the community engagement. So let me just open this up really quick. The very first point there, as I'm sure everybody read prior to the meeting, is whereas the Board of Education believes that building understanding through community listening sessions is the most effective and ethical way to pass a referendum. And then it goes on to delineate these are the benefits, kind of like what are the direct services to students in the district as a whole. That would be the outcome of passing an operational referendum. The next point delineates the consequences that we're currently suffering through, essentially, having failed or previously not passed the April 2023 referendum, but also what we hope to avoid in the future. Board President Levy just alluded to, if we were to pass a balanced budget right now, at what cost? And so since we're running out of fund balance, we want to make sure that we can provide the most minimal impact in terms of meeting the needs of our students, which is really just like the whole focus of having a school district. So the language at the end there resolves to the board requesting that the administration prepare an operational referendum, which is further down on the agenda, along with an appropriate schedule of community engagement opportunities and listening sessions, because Board Member Nichols and I both felt that we really need to establish that transparency, that trust, and that sense of togetherness and unity, not only amongst the board, but with our whole community, so that we truly can come together on that common good purpose of bringing public education to our children. So does anybody have any questions or concerns around the language?
Of bringing public education to our children. So does anybody have any questions or concerns around the language?
Anybody? So I'll start.
I think Board Member Levy has her hand up.
Anybody?
Thank you. I don't have a question or a
start,
concern.
I think Board Member Levy has her hand up.
Board Member Miller and Board Member Nichols for joining forces.
Thank you. I don't have a question or a concern.
And I'm excited to see how we
to
move
thank
forward.
Board Member Miller and Board Member Nichols for joining forces to work on this. And I'm excited to see how we
Thank you, Board Member Levy.
Yeah. Okay. I have a couple questions. What I'm just saying, so like in the first whereas, we'll have listening sessions as a way to pass a referendum.
What I'm just saying, so like in the first whereas.
I'm sorry.
So the idea was
explain to people what our situation is.
Well, and I think it's also important to engage with people about like what are their concerns, what are their concerns and current understandings, so that we can align.
It's important to engage with people about like what are their
concerns. Concern and current understanding is you continue to pass deficit budgets.
Right. Well, and I think very much.
So why should we bail you out?
Sure. Well, and that's a conversation that we have to have because, like you said, I mean, we got to have a school. And I think that there is a lot of public misunderstanding in terms of why we are where we are.
Like you said, we got to have a school.
Board Member Nichols brought to my attention a really beautiful editorial that was just published in the paper. And one of the points made in that editorial is about at some point we can't allow public schools in our city to get dried out.
I did read that editorial. It did make note that we have made some changes since the last time we asked for money.
In our city.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a great article.
I did read that editorial. It did make note that we have made some changes since the last time we asked for money.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a great article.
I think, Board President Levy, I think just like anything, if we got to build the foundation,
Board President, I think
before we can reap the benefits. And I think by starting with the public and board member Miller and I both agreed that that's where we need to start.
I think by starting with the public,
that's where we're going to make some headway. I think
that's where we need to start.
I agree because we have half of them.
That's where
there's about half.
Make some
headway, I think. When you look at the 100 or so votes that were missing in the Capitol and about the 400 that were missing in the operational.
100 or so votes.
It kind of shows us where we're at as a community. Some are for, some are against. So I do think that the difference of time and what we have the opportunity for in April and what we'll have the opportunity for this coming April,
difference of time
and some of the moves that still have to be made, and some other
in April,
actions that might need to be taken. Like I said, we did have lots of concerns as we moved from 4 middle schools to 2. And even as we made that decision, there was conversation that, do the numbers dictate that we need to move to 1?
And even as we made that decision, there was conversation.
So those are different things that are there, and definitely have looking to hear what our community's thoughts are about that. But in the end, as I go back to this statement, because I'm reading in the second whereas, where it talks about slowly restoring fund balance. And as we've been told a number of times here, the only way to restore fund balance is by asking through the operational referendum that we might come to some common understandings and collective action in that goal.
That we might come to some common understandings and
you got it. Go ahead. I'll just say, reading through it, I think it's a great start to kind of what I talked about earlier with that transparency, right? It's a simple document that says, here's where we're at.
It's a great
here's the positives if we move forward. Here's the downfall if we don't.
It's a simple
it's no different than the lanes we're in right now. For example, Dr. Garrison, he makes these day-to-day decisions for the district, and the board makes some board-level decisions. And this is the public's chance to say, hey, it's our turn to make a decision. So we just have to feed them with
this is the public's chance to say, hey,
good information. So we give them the why, and I think this is a good start to it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, actually. I mean, that's really, we have to come out with a strong why, and that's what Board Member Nichols and I talked a lot about. I mean, that why belongs to the whole community. The why does not just belong to the board. It doesn't just belong to the administration. It's our whole community's why. And, we're elected to these seats to help create things like this. And thank you for saying we brought your name up a number of times about, look, Brian told us we need to be as clear as possible, right? So we tried to lay out that opportunity cost, because you're right, it's about access, because we can't all own this shared community vision for how we want, because money is a mechanism to do the thing, right? So we can't do the things that we want to do for our kids without having that shared why and purpose of how we're using those funds to affect that change, right? Without giving people access to that understanding and kind of that buy-in, right? To that why.
Right, because in the last one, as you look at those consequences,
right? Without giving people
I do feel that we are in a place of experiencing some of the consequences of not passing the referendum. At that time, there were 7 people. We had a 6-1 vote to go to referendum. This time, as we're making these decisions, 5 of the same people will be making that decision with 2 additional people. But the consequences are, we're still getting close to that same consequence.
That decision with 2 additional people, but the
2 new people, same information.
We're still getting close to that same consequence.
All right. And the last one is that avoiding the following repercussions of the unsuccessful operational referendum.
The last one,
just the other thoughts, like I saw, I'm looking there, in that inability to compensate staff according to future CPI increases.
I'm looking there.
Because I know it was in jest, but Mr. Chady's comment is taking note, because in the end, as teachers are making year-to-year decisions about their employment with their contracts, and surrounding districts are making offers, and some districts in the state are giving 8%, and some are giving less than that. Those are choices that people make. So, for employees, we thank people today for their service.
Those are choices that people make. So
they have families too, mortgages and car notes and children, and they want to know that they can take care of their needs. And so that stability,
mortgages and car notes, and
what we're trying to avoid, as it says there, those are some of those things.
Right. I mean, and it's nothing to joke about. And if you look at the UAW situation, and I mean, the costs are, I mean, I've got 3 kids, and my grocery bill is obscene.
The UAW situation.
I mean, and we take advantage of free breakfast and free lunch at school, and our grocery bill is obscene. I mean, everybody's in that struggle. And when we talk about investing in our school district, we're talking about investing in the people who literally day to day give that care to our kids. And that's got to be like a number 1 priority, because because everybody knows the number one way to raise academic achievement lies in the hands of their teachers. So if we don't center on that, we're not centering on our kids.
Right. So I just kind of ask those questions because I looked there, saw my name is on that resolution. So I just want to make sure that
So I just kind of ask those questions because I looked there,
yeah,
saw my name
that
is
right.
that
Sean Levy, board president. There's other names there too, but I just know my name is there. So now, therefore, be it resolved, the School District of Beloit Board of Education requests the administration prepare an operational referendum along with an appropriate schedule of community engagement opportunities and community listening sessions. In witness whereof, the members of the Board of Education for the School District of Beloit have executed this resolution on today would be the 19th of September, 2023. So is there a motion or is there a motion to accept this resolution? I move to approve the.
So is there a motion?
Go ahead, Greg.
Is there a motion to accept?
Okay. Greg is moving fast down there today. The motion has been made by Board Member Snyder, seconded by Board Member Tia Johnson. Is there any discussion?
Motion has been made by Board
All
Member
right,
Snyder,
Mr. Shook, have a roll call vote, please.
Board Member Tia Johnson.
Yes.
Is there any discussion?
Tia Johnson,
Aye.
All right.
Brian
Mr. Shook,
Nichols?
Roll call vote,
Aye.
please.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
Aye.
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Brian Nichols,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Greg Schneider,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
and Sean Levy.
Aye.
Aye.
Amy
Motion
Levy,
carried unanimously.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Aye.
And
Thank you for that.
and Sean
Yes,
Sorry to
thank you.
interrupt.
Aye.
Special thanks to Board Member Nichols for making time to meet with me.
Thank you
I
very
really
much.
appreciated it.
Well, thanks for reaching out. It was
Sorry to
a fun,
interrupt. Special
fun
thanks
project.
to Board
Thank
Member
you.
Nichols
So
for
thank you
making time
to
to meet with me. I really appreciate
Board
it.
Member Miller and Nichols for helping get that going there. Operational referendum.
So I'll just kick us off.
And Nichols.
Naturally, part of our conversation since really July, once we started to have the conversation around what the budget impact, the state budget impact has on our school district. Naturally, we had to start having conversations around what is it that we need more in the school district. And one of the things that we've been discussing is an operational referenda. Naturally, in the operational referenda, we've talked about many different things, especially as pertains to how the state budget has impacted us, whether it be the high revenue, getting rid of the high revenue ceiling for us, the hold harmless clauses, the increased payments to charter schools, to many different variables in which this budget just didn't come to fruition for us. We don't get to see the extra $900 or so per kid, which in essence impacts us by the tune of a little over $12 million over the next 3 years. And so all of these things that we've discussed multiple times in many different ways, which again prompted us to have these types of conversations with the board around referendum. We discussed our referenda history with you all. Naturally, we discussed, in the history of Beloit, we've only been to referenda as we can date four times. And two of those questions was in April. And so we've done a very good job at, and I honestly can say this honestly, we've done a very good job in using what we have to educate our students. We've done over the many years of School District of Beloit. Other people around us has been to referendum multiple times. Of course, we've had conversations around, what those questions look like. We talked about, again, the impact of the state budget. Again, those two key legislations, increases in low revenue limit ceiling, and of course, then the 2023-2025 state biennial budget, the $325 per pupil revenue limit increase removes high poverty aid, which increases special education reimbursements rates, among others. And again, I'm not trying to go through the entire presentation once again, but again, it is something that you all have at your disposal. Another thing that happens in that in Wisconsin Act, and the 2023 Wisconsin Act 11 was again that $11,000 per student low revenue limit ceiling, and that's something that we don't have access to. And so these things, of course, hurt us in many different ways. And our goal is to see what's the flavor for the board as pertains to operational referenda, going into the 2024 school year.
And our goal is to see.
Yes, we do have some heavy constraints that we are working through.
Going into the 2024
I know we approved the preliminary budget
yes, we do
at a negative $40 million, at a negative $4 million. But what is more important is that we are also walking up on I like to call it a fiscal cliff. I hate to say cliff, fiscal horizon, where
more important is that we
some extra funds that we have, as mentioned in the previous conversations with ESSER, additional $12 million we will not be able to use from ESSER that we built into our budget to cover stuff that we're not asking the public to do. And so now, again, these are conversations in which once ESSER goes away, we're going to have some additional conversations or deeper conversations around what is it that we can actually do. Which brings us to the conversation around referenda. As I've stated before, there's not many ways we can get money. You know, there's not many ways we can get money. One, of course, from based off of there are many different calculations how they decide to give us money. And then, of course, through referenda. And in this case, this past year, both places were favorable for the school district of Beloit, in which, again, no one knew that they was going to give us this amount of money this time around. But we also didn't know that they would also ding us for not passing the referendum, for not being successful in the referenda. The one thing that we thought we should do is the one thing that we also got dinged on for not passing. And so we also kind of had like a triple whammy.
Is the one thing that we
in the school district of Beloit
for not passing. And so we also
that's just a fact. That's just what it is for us. Not just us, 29 other member school districts who fell in the conversation around not passing the referendum.
That's just what it is for us.
And so we all are in this conversation around what is it that we're going to do. And a lot of us are gearing up for the possible conversations, which it is my responsibility to bring this to you for a possible referendum conversation in the 2024 school year. Now, naturally, there's going to be conversations around when, and that's something that the board would have to discuss. And even if we don't fall on a conversation tonight, it is our responsibility to bring this conversation to you so that we can have the open discussion around if and when. That will allow me as a district administrator to start doing the same thing that I did last year, get the ball rolling on conversations. Now, again, every bit of time that I have, you know, one could argue that the window is still tight now even, right? You know, based off of when we make an approval or not.
You know, one could argue
puts me into different conversations because you know, we're all in this dance together, the community, the board, and administration. And we have to, you know, work on our dance and our dance moves so that we can, you know, move at a rate in which we all are having fun at the party. And so hopefully this is a conversation the board is willing to have again tonight. This conversation isn't going anywhere until a decision is made. And so I want to make sure that that's clearly understood. I will be bringing this to you all until we make a decision around if and when we are to go to referendum as pertains to timing. There was two options that we put on the board to consider. Option A, which would be having April 24 referendum conversation,
that we put on the board,
or a option B, which is to have a November 2024 conversation. Both present different challenges, and I'm not here to determine when we decide to go. That's not my decision. It's really the board's decision, but it is my conversation to have that we do get two questions in a year. And so, whether it's a capital question and an operational question, or whether it's two capital questions, or it's two operational questions, we only get two. Period. And that's something that the board, you know, needs to, you know, keep in mind as we make certain decisions. If we go operational referendum April, that's one question. If it passes, great. We have another question that we could possibly use in for capital in November of 24. That's an option. Or we say
for capital,
and then operational. Those are questions that we have to have. The EUA facility study is not yet completed. That's why we're talking about operational, but our bigger conversation is operational based off of our district needs currently. Once we have the data from our facility study and the information from the EUA, it'll better provide us the information around when we should possibly think about going to capital referenda. That won't stop us if we decide to go to operational referenda asking questions around capital referendum. Like, we can start probing the community around what is it that they're looking for, what is it that or what they like. Here's some of our needs. We can just kind of probe the conversation. So just because we decide to go to operational or not, or capital or not, both we can start probing the community around what is it that we want to see. However, we are also up against everybody else who wants to do an operational referendum right now. And the companies that help us with this are, far and few in between. They're booking up. Last year, as you already know, and I'll be done with this part of the presentation, 5 minutes. A lot of that came from in-house. When I say a lot, everything that you saw was stuff that we put together in-house. Team Monica Christopher, vision from me, vision from our business services at the time. We all kind of came together to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And it was almost successful. But our goal is not to go to referendum and not be successful. There's also conversations around what has a higher success rate of passing, April referendum versus a November referendum. But I always lean back on the ones that we did pass here in the city was they passed in April. The ones that didn't pass in April. And so our city is 50-50, if that makes any sense. And so I don't want to, again, speculate that someone will pass over or not pass or what's the perfect time. Those are decisions that the board will have to, discuss. And then we will move forward with whatever is given, but understanding that our operational conversation is at its shelf time. So that's the high-level overview of the conversation, and I'll turn it back over to the board for discussion.
All right, so we just all approved a resolution that says explore this referendum.
All right, so we just all approved a resolution.
So some of the other determinations here, which we can express ourselves, and I'll take you in any order you choose to. It's kind of the same thing again.
We can
2 questions can be asked in this upcoming year.
Kind of the same thing again.
An operational question and a capital question. We won't receive our final facility reports from EUA, who's taking care of that work for us until about November.
We won't receive
as our projected schedule to receive that.
Who's taking care of that work for us until about November.
There's the need to prepare the conversations and community listening sessions and engagements that we just said that we would conduct.
There's the need to prepare the conversations.
So our choices are we going to have operational, a capital, or both? Are we going to ask 1 question in April 2024 or 2 questions in April 2024? Are we going to ask 1 in April, 1 in November? Are there going to be 2 capital questions, 2 operational questions?
2024. Are we going to ask 1 in April,
so we
1
can
in November?
Keep moving things down the road so they can get closer to where we need to be so we can have conversations. We kind of had this conversation once, but I'll kick it off again to let people, where you at. We just had our other collective action and where you at now so we can give our administration some direction.
For President Levy, I need to, for childcare purposes, join virtually.
So you want to?
So do you mind if I'm going to kick the can?
You can go first.
But I'll be logging on as I walk out virtually, so I'm not going to miss anything. Okay, so just real quick, I think it's best to do 1 question at a time. I think there's a lot of clarity and messaging that goes along with that, and then given just the state of not having a facility study completed in a way that will be most informed until November, my preference would be to look at an operational referendum considered in April. Just as one with the caveat that our administration feels, and particularly our communications team feels, that will be adequate time to prepare transparent, clear, kind of like marketing. And marketing's not the right word really, but just like informational pieces, and that we have adequate time to not just hold maybe meetings at schools, but just really get into the community, engage with our community partners, with our neighborhoods, and make sure that we're bringing our message to people and making sure that we're bringing, that listening piece in, to kind of kick things off like a good sequence of that. So if our administration feels like that's enough time, that we have capacity to do that, I would prefer to go in April for operational.
If our administration feels like that's enough
time,
so
that puts you down as operational April 2024, Megan Miller. So just kind of to the administration question, Dr. Garrison,
is operational April 2024.
having had less time last time.
So just kind of to the administration
Is
question.
operational
Dr. Garrison,
2024 doable?
having had less time last time.
So,
is
like I
operational
stated before,
2024
whatever the
doable?
board decides, I will make doable because that is my, my
like I
goal
stated
as
before,
just as last year.
Whatever the board
And so we
decides,
decide
I
April
will make doable,
24.
because
I
that
will
is
make it
my
doable.
goal
If we
as just
decide
as
November
last year.
24,
And so
I will
we
make it
decide
doable.
April
When it comes to funds,
we'll make it doable. If we decide November 24,
we need the money when we need the money, and then right now, of course, we still
when it comes to
need the
funds,
money, and it's not a question about that part. So
we need the money.
that's
when
just
we need
where
the money,
we
and then
where we are
now,
right
of
now,
course,
and I don't want to.
Of course, we still need the money.
Again,
It's not a question about that.
I
part.
will
So,
make work whatever the
that's just
board
where we-
decides
where
to
we
move
are right
forward
now.
with.
And I don't want to.
That's my best
Again,
response.
I will make work whatever.
Yeah, but you're not saying, no, don't do that. That's a horrible mistake.
Oh,
That's
no,
my
no,
best-
I'm not
that's
saying
my
that at all.
best
Because that'll be what the board decides, and that'll be
but
what
you're
we'll
not
have to
saying,
move forward.
No, don't do that.
Okay.
That's a horrible mistake.
Gotcha.
No, I'm not saying
Board
that.
Member Amy
That'll
Levy,
be
hand is up.
The board decides, and
I'm
that'll be
actually
what
the
we'll have to move
opposite of
forward.
Board Member Miller. I
Gotcha.
think even though
Board
the
Member
study
Amy
will be
Levy,
done in
hand is up.
November, I think we need to.
I'm
and I
actually
appreciate
the
your
opposite
flexibility,
of Board
Dr.
Member
Garrison.
Miller.
Go
I
with
think
capital
even
in
though
April
the study will be done in
and
November,
operational
I think
in
we need to-
November. And my
and I appreciate your
rationale for that
flexibility, Dr.
position
Garrison.
is that we were
Go
really
with
close to getting
capital in
capital
April
passed.
and
And we're going to have a
operational in
larger
November.
turnout at the
And my
November
rationale
election.
for that position
And I think that
is
could
that
be
we
the
were
thing
really
that puts
close
us
to
over the
getting
top for the
capital passed.
operational piece.
And we're going to have a larger turnout at the November election. And I think that could be the thing that puts us over the top
A
for the
minute.
operation.
So I got you as Amy Levy, capital April 2024, and operational
So I got you as Amy Levy, capital April 2024,
November
and
20.
operational
24, and your rationale is kind of just based on turnout.
November 2024.
Correct.
Okay.
You,
So
your
I've
rationale
got
is
you on the
based
board.
on turnout.
Next.
Let me ask a quick question. So
I've got
if
you on the
we
board.
do a November operational,
Let me ask a quick
is
question.
that enough time
if
to
we
set the
do
tax
a
levy for
November
tax year
operational,
2025?
Is that
Okay.
enough time?
So
to
I guess
set the tax
my
levy
thought would be,
for tax year
you know,
2025.
we're not waiting to find out if we need some money, right? So I
guess
would start with an
my thought would
April operating, because again, we
we're not
already
waiting to
know we
find out
need
if
it.
We need some money, right? So
And then
I
the
would
second
start
decision
with
is
April.
depends on what happens, right? So
we already know. We need it. And then the second
sooner's-
decision is
sooner's better, in my
depends
opinion.
on what happens, right? So
Because if you do need two swings,
sooner's
you can
better,
still do
in my
that, right?
opinion.
So
because if you do need two swings,
Okay. So I got you as operational April 2024. Let's, as we're thinking these things out,
Okay. So I got
something
you as,
horrible could happen this winter, and we have an immediate capital need that we don't have now.
As we're thinking these things out,
So just
something horrible could happen.
keeping all this
winter,
stuff in
and
mind.
We have an immediate capital
All right.
need that we don't have now.
Next. And your just a minute. Your capital is
Keeping all this
well.
stuff in mind.
Either we need one
All right.
because it passes, or
next.
we need two because it didn't pass.
And your just a minute.
For your
capital
operational is what you're saying with
either we
the
need
April
one
2024.
It passes, or we need two because it didn't pass.
yeah, I think
For your
the
operational is what you're.
we don't know what the capital one assessment says yet, so it's kind of hard. We're kind of guessing there, but we know
I
there's
think the-
certain needs that are gonna
I don't
show
know what the
themselves. But I
capital
think,
assessment says yet. So it's
for
kinda
example,
hard
if you're
to kinda
playing what
guess
if,
there, but we know there's
if an
certain
operational
things that
referendum fails
show
in
themselves, I think.
April,
For example,
you
if you're playing
probably
what
have
if,
to
if-
do an
if
operational in November because you
referendum
can't do, that puts
fails in
capital off a
April.
year, because that's probably the more
You probably have to do
the significant immediate need is who's going to be the operational.
That
That's
puts
just
capital off.
how I see it playing out if it were to play out that way.
Significant immediate need is going to be
Next.
operational. That's just how I see it playing
I
out.
have a question to ask. When will we receive our rating from the DPI for
Next.
22-23 school year? I have a question to ask. When will we receive?
So typically that's released.
For 22.
I mean, they've done it differently since, I hate to say the C word, COVID.
So typically that's
We
released.
will probably have our rating
they've done it differently
sometime in
since-
November-ish,
I hate to say the C
maybe.
word,
Yeah,
COVID.
that's what I'm. October, November.
we
It
will probably
really
have our
falls
rating
in those 2 months.
sometime in November-ish, maybe. Yeah, that's what I'm. October,
Thank you,
November.
Dr. Garrison. Well, the reason I asked that question is
in those
Board
2
Member
months.
Miller and I kind of talked about that the other day when we
Thank you, Dr.
sat
Garrison.
and
Well, the reason
worked
I
up
asked that question is Board Member Miller and I talked
piece.
about that the other day when we.
I think that's going to be an important question to have answered, to sit down with the public. Initially sit down with the public.
I think that's
they're going to want to
question to have answered.
From what I've heard in the past, they're going to want to hear. They're going to hear some good news.
I think they're going to want to.
And that's that'd be a great way to start a listening session is, hey, look here. Here's one thing, and then just take it from there.
That'd be a great way to start
I'm paraphrasing badly right now,
hey,
but you know what I mean.
So
I will note that, we did go from a 2-star to a 2.5-star last year.
But you know
now, let's say we was to hold steady, and let's say stay 2-star, or let's say we was to go up. Who knows? 1 star. Sorry,
let's say we was to hold
to a 2-star. And so I think we are in the. Thank you for making the clarification. We are in the process. We're in the throes of these things, and I think we will continue to make those leaps and bounds as time presents itself. With a focus on instructional and background that I have, and that the school district is moving towards, I do believe we'll keep making gains accordingly.
That I have, and that the school district is moving towards.
Okay. Well, I pretty much agree with Brian. The other Brian, that we do it. We pretty much look at doing an operational in the spring, and then it depends after that.
We do it. We look at doing an operational in the spring.
So I've got you down as operational April 2024, and like Brian, depends on what happens in that April 2024.
Operational April 2024.
Just want to
and
just want to follow up too. Like,
depends on what happens in that.
This is just the educator in me. It would be nice to be a 3-star. It'd be nice to be a 5-star district in November.
Just the educator in me. It would be.
I just want to say
to be a 3-star.
That all the performance of the children that's going to go into those numbers, that has already happened. So that number that's going to come out in November, whether if we fall to a 1-star, or if we increase to 3 stars, or if we increase to 5 stars,
if we fall to a 1-star,
no matter what that number is,
to 3 stars,
our budget, as we've already projected it, is still going to be the same. And we still have to educate children.
Our budget, as we've already
so that performance does matter. And yes, it would make
children.
Different citizens feel a certain way.
Does matter.
But when you start at 1 and you get to 2, that's an improvement.
Different citizens feel a certain way.
So we're in a situation that,
you start at 1,
for a district, like we've been in some survival mode and getting things done. And like I said, I'm referencing our strategic plan when we talk about creating this budget stability. But it starts with taking the time to make a strategic plan.
I'm referencing our strategic.
We didn't have an executive director of finance. And we didn't have a superintendent.
Make a strategic plan.
We got a superintendent.
We didn't have.
And then we got an executive director of finance. And we're continuing to build out some of these departments because people are missing. Because at the same time that we're trying to make these other financial decisions, all these other things are still happening. So November's performance does matter, like what happens with our kids.
All these other things are still happening.
But even if it's 5 stars,
November's performance,
that'll be this year.
Like what happens with our
but
kids.
we still need that money, whether or not,
even if it's 5
so we can continue to fund their education.
Okay, that'll be.
And like we're going to find out some third Friday count numbers.
Money. Whether
we may have increased our enrollment, or our enrollment might have decreased.
Find out some third Friday
so unlike sports, where we have clear scoreboards, and you can tell what team is winning and what team is losing.
So unlike sports, where we have clear scoreboards,
there's no way for people to understand that we're progressing. I go back to when you think about the education of your child.
There's no.
You either know that your child is at, above, or below where they should be.
I go back to when you think about the education.
And as a school district, we're kind of working through those things too. And even the work that we're doing as a school board, as we work our way through these situations, we talk these things through. We vote.
And even the work that we're doing,
we might not be 7-0, but we take our time to talk to these things.
We talk
work together.
We vote.
Do some outside work to bring it back to the group, like you and Megan did. That those are things that we're trying to demonstrate to the community. That we are making progress too. So, like I said, those things are important, and I do understand where they sit at. But just kind of like just another perspective that those numbers and things will already be decided, but our financial numbers that we know are not going to change based on that. but definitely understand that people might feel more motivated if they were to see us increase from 2 stars to 3 stars, or even to 5.
People might feel more motivated if they were to see us increase from 2 stars to 3 stars, or even to 5.
I'll go next. I am in favor of an April operational referendum. If that fails, then that gives us the opportunity in November to have another operational. If it passes, then we can do the capital in November. Every referendum this district has passed has been a capital referendum, and beautiful buildings are nice and wonderful, but buildings don't teach children.
Beautiful buildings
Teachers,
are nice and
people
wonderful.
teach children.
Buildings
This beautiful building we're in here, came out of operational funding.
Children.
I wasn't in favor of that then, and now we are, how many million in the hole, and this building was how much? We made some bad decisions along the way, and I think this board is ready to say we need to have our budget priority follow our heart priority. So that's where I am.
Budget priority follow our heart priority. So that's where I am.
I agree that we need to go for an operational referendum in April. And then I agree. Depending on what we get from the report on facilities and what happens, we can decide what our priority needs to be for November. The report on facilities and what happens, we can decide what our priority needs to be for November.
Okay. So I'm
Okay.
I'm not torn.
So
because I do believe that for me, it's kind of simply of following along with our strategic plan is like stabilizing our budget, and I think that operational referendum in April 2024 will stabilize our budget.
Like stabilizing our budget.
It all depends on what the voter turnout is and what the people decide. Like I said, I think that with our last budget, our last referendum,
what the people decide.
I know from my role, the thing that I was seeking to do is let's get this information in front of our community so they can study it and understand it.
The thing that I was seeking to do is let's get this
and take
information
action.
in front of our community.
I did not want us to be poor public stewards by not putting that information out in front.
And take action.
So I would be for April 2024, and it's dependent on what happens. Again, like I said, we're in September 19th where we don't have a significant capital issue because anything could happen. There's new information. There's things that could come along that could change what our prioritization is right now. If we have a late season tornado and the high school gets knocked down, we're going to need to build a new high school. I mean, we just don't know what is coming our way. So that's kind of, where we're at on this end. And also make that point because we were at a state at a place with our federal funding in ESSER where the state said to us spend down those ESSER dollars, spend the money that the federal government gave you first,
federal funding,
and then the state says the other way that you increase is by asking your public, and we took those steps as we were waiting for the state to take other actions, and they did increase funding to education, but in a way that takes more money from us in this current budget. So, with those understandings of where things are at and what our responsibilities are, I would be at operational April 2024, and we'll determine what our need is. Maybe our capital will come back and say, our capital will come back and show us that we don't have many actions to take with buildings right now, but I do think we need to get that operational. So I would put myself in April 2024. So as we just kind of went through this exercise, we'd be at, 6 saying, let's go to operational in April 2024, and 1 saying, let's go to capital in 2024. Board Member Levy, you were on that other space we're just talking through. What would you think about where we're at and kind of seeing where the board is?
Board Member Levy, you were on that other space.
So as always, what
would you think
about
where we're at and kind of seeing where the board is?
To the will of the board. And again,
So as always,
since Capitol was closed, and we're going to have a lower turnout, unfortunately, in April than we will in November. I wish everyone voted in every election, no matter what.
We're going to have a
But
lower
unfortunately,
turnout,
that's just not the
unfortunately,
case.
in April than
I
we
thought we
will
had a
in
better
November.
chance
I
of
wish
passing
everyone
Capitol
voted in every
in
election,
April
no matter
and
what. But
operational in
unfortunately, that's just
November.
not the case.
Not that Capitol
I
is
thought
more
we had a better
important than
chance of passing
operational.
Capitol
I was
in
just looking
in
at the numbers
April
and turnout.
and
But yeah,
operational
I'm
in
willing to yield to
November.
the will of the board.
Not that Capitol is more important than
I'm understanding that too. I appreciate that explanation. And one of the things is also to like to talk about to our community.
I'm understanding that too. I appreciate that explanation.
400 votes and 100 votes are very close. And I think it is about a message that our board sends. So it's different for a board to be 6-1 versus a board being 7-0 in this type of ask.
So it's different for a board to be 6-1.
I don't know. So the second place that I would ask is that when it comes to us asking this, because sometimes we want to make sure that board members understand what they're being asked to do.
When it comes to us,
are people okay with?
Because sometimes we want to make sure that board members
voting tonight,
what they're being asked to do,
or next meeting. Just wanting things to be clear, so no one's on the spot. But we've kind of weighed out where we're at. This is our second time, so I'm just
next meeting.
I think that's a part of our. Just some of the norms of operation that we've used to keep ourselves together and be courteous towards each other about when to take action on this. Because the sooner we take action, that gives Dr. Garrison and the team room to move. But I just want to understand where board members are at.
That gives Dr. Garrison and the team room to move.
If you got something to say, weigh in, please.
Understand where board members are
I'm
at.
fine with voting this evening.
I'm ready to take action.
Please.
Okay.
I'm fine with voting this evening.
All right. Brian and Brian, you guys okay?
To take action.
Well, we kind of took action on, with that resolution, as far as.
Brian and Brian, you guys okay?
Yeah, I guess I'm good.
Took action on,
I need more clarification on what action you're looking to actually vote on, because it doesn't. We've already said let's move towards.
I need more clarification on what
an operating referendum, which
because it doesn't.
The first opportunity is April of 2024. So I guess I'm just curious what more we need to vote on.
Is April of 2024.
So I think where we are at, I'm trying to make sure we got, we do have the resolution, but is it, Dr. Garrison, you need to know April 2024 or November 2024, and then we have to get to that process of developing the question again?
Correct. So there are steps.
What steps are needed?
So the steps are naturally the board decides that we want to go to operational referendum.
Correct. So there are steps that
based off of what we're hearing, possibly April 2024. From there, I start the conversations around community input,
possibly April 2024.
Looking at our finances, what could be some surveys, looking at like from the resolution, you all have given me some whereases to take care of, and so whereas I have to go and start looking at all of that that conversation, then really start getting some community input from the conversation. We don't have to move in an ad hoc committee format. We don't have to do that. We can actually really lean into our community seat and start having conversations around here's our state of our finances and what could be our ask for operational referenda. We will have to have more conversations with Baird, looking at our debt and our defeasance, more conversations with my business office. It's everything that I did last year in roughly 7 weeks. A little more than in this case, a little more than that this time around.
Everything that I did last year in roughly 7 weeks.
In a nutshell of kind of what's to come.
In this case, a little more this time around.
Based off of the board's decision, naturally, I wake up in the morning, I blink my eyes, and I start back working on what does it actually look like, and start laying out a plan for that conversation. That's getting in contact with school perceptions, and I can go down a list of things that I have to do, but those are the things that I did last time, and I don't want to bore the board, but there's a lot of other things that I have to start looking at to start laying out our conversation even. Naturally, we're still meeting with EUA. We have a meeting with them even tomorrow. This information has to be shared with them, and naturally, like I mentioned, if we all decide to go April 2024, April 24th next year, that doesn't stop us from having conversation around, well, what is the flavor for capital? I mentioned that in general. Like, what does it look like? But in absence of having what we need.
mentioned that
It does make it a little bit harder, but those are some of the things that we've also started to try to capture
But in absence of having
in our capital conversation, as well as moving forward with our operational conversation if the board votes tonight.
All right. Board Member Miller, are you on remotely?
Moving forward with our operational
I
conversation.
certainly am.
Votes tonight.
Okay.
Board Member
I just want to make
Miller, are
sure.
you on remotely?
I know that we still had a quorum, but I just wanted to see if you were
I certainly
here.
am.
'Cause I couldn't see on my.
100%.
So
I know that we still had a quorum, but I just wanted to see if you were here because I couldn't see.
just for clarification, go ahead. Go ahead, Brian.
So,
No, you got it.
So is it possible that the EAU survey could come back and all of a sudden we decided, well, no, we need a capital referendum?
Is it possible?
Is that possible?
That the EAU
Again, not having the survey, not having information in front of me is kind of hard for me to make that determination. There will be some things that we have to correct in our district.
Not having information in front of me is
just
kinda hard
looking from the outside looking in is one thing. Oh, the buildings look great, but when you start digging into systems and shelf life of HVAC and
when you start digging
electrical and
systems,
let's be honest with you, we still having problems with our lights on the football field.
HVAC
and
trying to address
we're trying to address that too. I mean, it's $100,000 per pole if you wanted to change the lights from our beyond outdated conversation with just the lights on our football field. And so the EUA is going to come with, okay, there's some things you can take care of, like they mentioned, that we need to take care of immediately, things that we can put on the plan or things that we can wait, down the road.
Like they mentioned,
and so they're going to give us that information, EUA and Fendorf, I should say, as it pertains to cost analysis to fix certain things. And so they're going to give us that information, and when we have it, we'll be able to say, well, board, here's some things that we need to think about on the immediate side, which further goes back to Board Member Levy's conversation, possibly what we need to possibly fix down the road. But again, like I mentioned from the start, we have two questions. That's all we got.
Possibly of what we need to possibly fix down the road.
One in operational and it passes, and then we have another question in November. That could be easily capital because you can't ask the same question in the same year. If you pass it, of course. If you fail, you could ask the same question again.
Capital because you can't ask the same
Right.
question
I was
in the same year.
just kind of like, sometimes this is the other understanding, like if it's September,
right,
or I'll give ourselves, if we decided tonight, or even if we decided 2 weeks from now, and the work in that operational began, we're moving towards that concretely. We're not going to get the information from EUA and Fendorf until about November.
We're moving towards that
is when they're projected to deliver their full
from EUA and Fendorf until about
late October, late October, November timeframe.
Right. So
they're shifting some things as we speak.
So as they're working, again, late October, early November, kind of puts us in the same time frame. I think
they're working, again,
whenever we decide what questions to ask, that's when we're deciding. But like I said, those surveys are going to come back, and we have to make some move here. So I guess just for clarification, and I'm asking other people too, we did have our resolution that said, prepare for the referendum. We just kind of checked ourselves through consensus that people said, yes, let's get ready for April 2024. Now to actually be prepared and get on the ballot, we'll have to have the question formed. So are you proposing that we just send you all off to do the work and the math and let the math and come back with the numbers that we need as you work with Baird and be able to present it to us, and then we kind of move forward from there? Or and then, like you said, the public information sessions that educate that, or do you need us to vote tonight? Because I think people are ready.
Sure. I mean, the board's ready to vote tonight. For sure. The board's ready to vote tonight. I will accept your vote.
Because I think people are ready.
Again, for me, close my eyes tonight, open them up tomorrow. We start having conversations around what that actually looks like. What we will have to do to prepare the public for an operational conversation through listening sessions, through meetings with Baird, through conversations with school perceptions through multiple other opportunities for people to come in and share what they like or what they dislike, and really try to inform our community around this operational request. Again, it's going to take us some time to get together our financial institutions, just like it did last time, to formulate what our request will end up being. But that's with input from the various community conversations as well. And so it's going to be a process that we have to walk ourselves through, just like last time. And we will bring to the board
it's going to be a process that
information. There's many different ways we can do it. Through the community conversations, we can bring a question, and then the board can decide if they like the question or change the question. Or we can bring all the information from the community to the board, and you can formulate the question. I mean, there's many different ways we can do it. Last time we did an ad hoc route where we gathered information and they wrote the questions, and then we brought it back to the board, and there were some shifts in the questions at that point. But there's many different ways we can get to the questions, but regardless, it has to be to the commission in January.
At that point.
Okay, so Board Member Levy, I see your hand. I'm going to recognize you in a minute. So just another backdrop as we kind of decided this and talked it through.
I see your hand. I'm going to.
All of this is still happening. We're at the same time we're looking toward a budget that's going to be negative $4 million. And some adjustments will still be made throughout the year, so that we hopefully don't come in at negative $4 million. We still have things to do, like decide compensation of teachers and staff. And so, in essence, like as we've worked through tonight, we said yes, we know we need to ask for operational referendum. We kind of said we should do that in April 2024, and we still have these other things to do. So just kind of as the thought is, you still haven't fired your administrators yet.
Other things to do. So just
you still haven't let people go yet. So all of these conversations are going on at the same time. And like you said about the community and engagement and understanding of these are the steps that are being taken and the way that these steps are being taken and where things will be at. I didn't mean to say that cavalierly, but like you said, it's an issue of the different employee groups, what our obligations to them are, their understanding of steps that have already been taken, because again, contracts for administrators are going to come up in August. We have the buildings as they are. Like, there are lots of things that are happening. And I say again, as I've said before, we are one of the largest employers in the city of Beloit.
We have the buildings as they are. Like,
how we get to where we need to be in our size.
We are one of the largest employers in the city of Beloit.
And how we
get to
ask and engage our community for something that we all agree needs to happen. Like, these are all the things that are happening at the same time.
Ask and engage our community that we all.
Sorry, just like last year, I was doing all those things at the same time. Part of my responsibility to the school board is
at the same time
to continue to do the work that I do day to day. That's my job, and I have a team of wonderful people that I work with, from administration to my executive team as well.
That's my job,
and
I have a team.
They all know I come to work every day, and so and we're here to get the job done. And so there's a lot of things that I will have to do, just like last time when we were having this conversation, and that's just part of where we are until we're able to land where we need to be, fiscally strong based off of our strategic plan.
Where we are.
All right. Does anyone want to make the motion?
Well, I have a question.
Based off of our
That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to recognize you.
All right.
So Dr. Garrison, do you and your team need any further clarification from the board?
Oh, I'm sorry.
For me,
I
I
forgot
guess
to
that
recognize your hand.
determine whether or not we need to take an initial vote. And just to recap, we already have unanimously stated to direct the administration to an operational initial vote. Are you looking for language to expand that to capital? Even though it seems like the consensus is if capital comes, it won't be until November 2024. And there are also no dates listed with the initial vote that we took. Would it be helpful to you to have those dates formalized by the board, or are you good to go with the vote we already took?
the initial vote that we took? I'll be good to go with the vote of what you all have voted, went through right now through the consensus. If you all say April 2024, let's move forward with preparation for April 2024 operational ballot. That's what I'll be doing. Now, that does not, again, like you mentioned, Mrs. Levy, does not take off the conversation that we're still working through capital stuff. And so there may be some things what I have to bring back to you all and say, hey, we may have to look at this at a later time. But that'll be information I'll have to bring to the board. So I don't need any more information from the board outside of y'all directing me to move forward.
So I don't need any more information from the board outside of y'all directing me to move forward.
You got it, Brian.
Well, I kind of agree with Brian. I mean, we've already passed the resolution. We all voted on that unanimously. Well, so I think that's.
Agree with Brian. I mean, we've already passed the resolution.
It feels like we're kind of jumping the gun just a little bit because there's additional information that could come in the next 30 days.
It feels like kind of
the state could
just a little bit because
the state could reverse
additional
the
information
decision on whatever that next 30 days. Crazy bill was that passed in 2017. I know we've got both of our state senator and assemblymen working on that.
Crazy
and
that's
true. And I know I have a couple phone calls that I'm going to make too.
So that is true. I think
that's true.
And even if the state makes a shift and change,
so
that doesn't take away our fiscal horizon that's still coming with the 2024 budget with ESSER going away.
Take away
and so the operational conversation, as I've stated, is still a thing for the school district of Beloit. We still don't have a fund balance.
Operational conversation.
Those are things that, again, even if things change, there may still be a need for us to go to operation. Will be a need for us to go to operational referenda if we are to turn the corner financially. Now, it will probably lower our deficit. If the state changes its mind, okay, that's true. But it won't change the fact that the cliff is still, well, I hate to say cliff, horizon is coming, which is a real true thing for the school district of Beloit. And that those ESSER funds were already allocated prior to you being on the board, prior to me coming, prior to a lot of things happening with all of us. Those things had already been allocated for in our school district. So that's the other side of that conversation. That we probably still will need to have some form of operational conversation because we don't have fund balance. And we also will run into that cliff of how we're going to keep and or get rid of $12 million worth of services that could possibly have impact on our school district.
Megan Miller, I see your hand.
$12 million worth of services.
Yeah. Okay. So, folks, I would be in favor of taking a vote, and here's why.
Megan Miller,
I think if we vote right now to go to operational referendum in April, and I think the date that was in the presentation, but here's why was April 2nd, 2024. Right now, that gives us time to formulate a question, and then there's like our administrators that have to do this work know with certainty that that's the direction that we're headed. So, like Board Member Nichols, for example, I agree with your sentiment. I hope they do reverse that 2017 kind of silliness that's so harmfully impacting so many students in all over our county. But even if they do, it's not going to make significant. It's not going to give us another $12 million, right? So I mean, I think what that would do is it would impact our the ask that we're making, right? And we still have that wiggle room to say, do we need to go to the ballot for $24 million or for whatever $1 million? And that we have time to bring in that information, but I think taking that vote right now gets the wheels turning so that we can have those conversations and move the work forward. For example, we can start to engage our community right away. If we vote today to say, yep, this is what we're doing, let's get those sessions organized, let's hear from folks, and let's really shape our ask around the collective vision and needs from the community.
This is what we're doing, let's get those sessions organized, let's hear from folks, and let's really shape our ask around the collective vision and needs from the community.
That is that's an explanation. So again, is everyone comfortable, or is there some unreadiness?
That's an explanation. So again, is everyone comfortable, or is there some unreadiness?
Okay. All right. What is that?
It
doesn't matter. All right. Okay.
What is that?
Is there a motion?
All right. Okay.
Megan Miller, hand raised.
I'd move that the Board of Education approve
hand raised.
going to operational referendum in April. I guess it's April 2nd, 2024. Approve. But I'm not sure if there are details missing from my motion. So if somebody wants to check on that before there's a second, if there's a second, that would be great. But I'm not sure if there are details missing from my motion. So if somebody wants to check on that before there's a second, if there's a second, that would be great.
Okay. So it's been moved by Megan Miller that the board authorize our administration to prepare for April 2024 operational referendum. April 2nd being the date. It's been seconded by Board Member Schneider. Is there any discussion?
April 2nd being the date. It's been seconded by.
Okay, so I'll throw one out for discussion just to be clear.
Is there any discussion?
Like, you know, as we've said that we kind of talked about it, we worked our way through it together. There's a resolution that outlines why we're doing this.
Said that
we kind of talked about it. Seen that most of us are lying in April 2024. Board Member Levy explained her reasons and understands where we're at with the group. And formally, we're just saying to our community and saying to our administration that, yep, April 2024, we need to ask an operational question.
Formally, we're just saying to our community and saying to our administration that, yep, April 2024.
There's other parts of this, you know, when they work with Baird and bring other information together that will form that question, the same processes that we used last time.
You know, when they work with Baird and
we won't be doing it through an ad hoc committee, but our community have input and engagement as that resolution read, because we're trying to address our operational issue.
Our community have.
That's my understanding of what we're doing.
As that resolution read.
I just wanted to make sure that as we go through, that everyone's clear and we're able to move. Go ahead, Anderson.
I just wanted to make sure.
So, I mean, I think it's a little redundant because I think the resolution serves the purpose, but my concern is if we take a motion and we say we're going to do this, and
my concern is
if let's just say hypothetically, because we're going to have a lot of conversations with a lot of different stakeholders between now and then. And the public says, hypothetically, if you do this, it is not going to pass. I don't care if you ask for $1 or $10 million or $100 million. And we say, well, we voted, we're going to go to operational referendum April 2024, and that doesn't pass, and it resets our 3-year window of being penalized. You know, I think it's a little premature when I think the direction penalized. I think we've given.
I think it's a little.
Dr. Garrison gives him
when I think
full breath to move towards an operational referendum in 2024.
Dr. Garrison
on the resolution. So that's just my thought.
Full breath to move towards an operational referendum in 2024.
I don't know if I'm not being clear. The vote as that we're possibly going through with, I don't know if I'm only allows clear. The resolution gives the board
going through with
the conversation
only allows
as to why we want to go to operational revolution. The board gives the board the conversation around why we want to go to operational referendum. But I have to prepare for a date.
Gives the board
on this referendum.
Conversation around
so I could be preparing all next year and into 2025
for a date.
So I have to.
On this
I will have to decide on a date of either April or November. You see what I'm saying?
So I have.
I can go. You're right. The resolution tells me to go out and start preparing. It does, but I have to put something on a ballot on a time frame. That makes sense.
This is a specific direction you're saying. This would be the specific direction from the board is
on a time frame.
Be ready for April 2024. That's what we're trying to do.
Correct.
This would be
right
because I can go out and start preparing everything, like gathering information and all that. But at some point, I have to the board has to decide on the date.
I can go out and start preparing
in which we will go to
gathering information
referendum.
But at some point,
April or November, because we can only go those 2 times.
Which we will go to.
Okay, and I do concede that is, as I review the resolution again. That date is not.
See that is, as I review the
specifically addressed in the resolution. So
that date is not.
So for a little clarity, as we went through, we understand that Yeah, this one is to establish that
So for a little clarity,
we're doing this in
we
April
understand that,
2024 as of tonight. I know we're still in the middle of the discussion, but I mean, as we're
doing this in
discussing,
April 2024.
it could also be
as
that,
of tonight.
again, if we
I know we're still in the middle of
decided
the
not
discussion,
to,
but I mean, as
we know how
we're
to
discussing.
get ramped up
it
for
could
things
also
and we
be
know how
that,
to walk our way out of it, or we've already practiced trying to rescind motions too. So, I mean,
get ramped up for things, and we know how to.
so we can always
our way out of
take
it,
it
or
back. That's,
we've
I
already
said that in the
practiced trying to
graduation
rescind
speech, that
motions
sometimes
too,
when you
so, I mean,
fail, it helps to have, it helps you to have success in later times. So,
I said that in the
you
graduation.
know, we can be
speech,
safe
sometimes when you fail.
in saying that we're trying to go for April, we're going for April 2024.
So,
and if we need to adjust something in between, you know, we know how to do it. We got a parliamentarian. We got other board members that work together.
We need to adjust something in between.
So we'll be
We know
okay.
how to do it. We got a parliamentarian.
But I think as we've gone through the night, we've said that we need operational assistance.
We'll be okay.
And we've all said April 2024.
Gone through the night. We've
All
said
right,
that.
so any more discussion? Just make sure we got clarity about what we're doing. That's one of our norms. We know what we're voting on and why.
All right. So
All
any
right.
more discussion? Just make sure we got clarity about what
Anybody
we're doing.
else?
It's one of our norms. We know what we're voting on and why.
Okay. So hearing no more discussion, Megan Miller, is your hand up?
I guess I was just going to say, kind of, Board Member Anderson, to your point, like
hearing no more
I'm with
discussion.
you on that. Like
Megan
we need
Miller,
to be
your hand up.
responsive to what we hear, and it's like if we initiate this, it's like almost like a catch-22. I mean, like if we don't say, if it's ambiguous about when we're going,
we need to be responsive to what we hear.
It lessens the. I mean, it's like let's
almost
make
like
it
a
real for
catch-22.
people.
I mean,
Hear what
like,
they have to
if
say,
we
and if
don't
folks
say-
are
if
like
it's
absolutely
ambiguous
not
about
for
where
all
we're
these
going,
unanticipated reasons, we can change our
I mean,
motion.
it's like,
You know what
let's
I'm
make it
saying?
real
Like this
for people,
doesn't
hear what
lock
they
us
have to
into.
say,
This
and
isn't
if
like
folks are
not
like
being
absolutely
responsive
not
to
for
folks,
all
but
these
what this does,
unanticipated
from my
reasons,
perspective,
we can
is this lets
change our
gets the
motion.
ball rolling
You know
in a
what I'm
very
saying? Like,
real
this
way.
doesn't lock us
You know,
into-
and
this
allows
isn't, like,
everybody
not being
to
responsive
engage
folks,
in
but
this
what this
reality
does
of going in
from my
April. And if it turns
perspective
out that that's
is this
not
lets
the right
gets
thing,
the ball rolling
as
in a
we
very
discussed,
real way.
there's nothing
And
stopping us
allows
from changing
everybody
it, right?
to engage
So
in this
I just
reality
wanted
of
to
going in
respect what
April,
you
and
were
if it
saying. I
turns
think
out
it's
that
a really
that's
good point
not
that
the
you
right
brought up.
thing,
But that's
as we
where
discussed,
I
you
would
know,
still,
there's
still
nothing
be in
stopping
favor
us
of just
from
taking the
changing
vote
it,
now.
right?
And then we always
I
have
just
that
wanted
wiggle
to
room as we
respect what
go.
you were saying. I think it's a really good point that you brought up. But that's where I would still, still be in favor
Okay,
of
anybody
taking
else?
the vote now. And then we always have that wiggle room.
All right. So the motion is for preparing, we're going operational referendum April 2nd, 2024.
Whoever roll
Motion is for preparing. We're going to operational referendum April 2nd, 2024.
That's the question.
Whoever roll call.
Mr. Shope, we have a roll call vote, please.
Yes.
So that's the
For
question.
clarity, I means you're going for
Mr. Shope,
April 2024. Nay means no. Don't do that.
And for clarity, I means you're going for
Okay.
April 2024.
Greg Schneider.
Aye.
Nay means no.
Amy Levy.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Megan Miller.
Greg Schneider.
Aye.
Brian Anderson.
Aye.
Brian Nichols.
Megan Miller.
Aye.
Tia Johnson.
Brian Anderson.
And Sean Levy.
Brian Nichols.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Tia Johnson.
Okay.
And Sean
This
Levy.
is government. We're
Aye.
moving. Okay.
Motion
So
carried
we are preparing
unanimously.
for April 2024 referendum.
This is government. Weird.
My
Okay.
computer is frozen.
So
I
we are
can't get to
preparing
the
for
agenda.
April 2024 referendum.
Just a minute. I have to pull out my paper copy.
My computer is frozen. I can't get to the agenda. Just a minute. I have to pull out
All
my
right.
paper.
Future board meeting dates, which I can't see without my computer. Read those for me, Dr. Garrison.
Sure. The future board meeting dates will be
Which I can't see
October
without
the
my computer.
2nd. For a regular board meeting,
Read those for me,
October the
Dr.
3rd
Sure, the future
will
board
be
meeting dates will
our
October
policy
2nd,
meeting. October the 17th
for a regular
is another
board
regular
meeting,
board meeting.
October the 3rd
But I want to add
will be,
there may be some special meetings in between
policy meeting,
now and
October
October
17th.
because of
It's
the
another regular board meeting.
preliminary budget
But
and
I
adoption
want to add there
and
may be some
CPI
special
possible
meetings in
conversations
between
as well.
now and October because of the
Okay.
preliminary budget
So
and adoption
we're now at item
and
8,
CPI possible conversations.
executive session. A motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C, relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and Section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Our items are BEA negotiation strategy discussion, which is covered in 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C, and parentheses E. And we go into closed session. We will be adjourning from closed session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And we go into closed session. We will be adjourned.
Is there a second?
Session.
Second.
Is there a motion?
Okay, so it's been moved by Board Member Amy Levy and seconded by Board Member Tia Johnson.
Second.
Mr. Shook, a roll call vote, please. Is there any discussion?
Board Member Amy Levy and seconded
Mr.
by
Shook, may I have a roll call vote?
Tia Johnson.
Yes.
Mr.
Tia
Shook, may I have a
Johnson?
roll call vote, please.
Aye.
Is there any
Brian
discussion?
Nichols?
Aye.
Brian Anderson?
May I have a roll call vote.
Megan Miller?
Aye.
Tia Johnson,
Amy Levy?
Brian Nichols,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Greg Schneider?
Aye.
Megan
Aye.
Miller,
And Sean Levy?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay.
Aye.
All right.
Greg
We'll be
Schneider?
adjourning from closed session.
Aye.
and Sean Levy.
They die.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay. All right.